Putnam County Board of County Commissioners meeting Tuesday, December 9th, 2014. Welcome each of you to our morning proceedings. This time, Reverend Sheila McCoy of God's Manor Ministry will lead us in our invocation. Our Vice Chairman, Walt Pelletier, will lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. Let's all stand together.
Holy Father, in Jesus' name, we thank you for our county and its government. We uphold before you men and women who are in position of authority, particularly this morning, our county commission. We thank you and believe that skillful and godly wisdom have entered into their hearts. We ask that you guide them in their decision making. We ask that you put people in their paths to give godly counsel and they do what is right in your sight. Your word declares, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Turn our hearts back to you in all we do. Amen.
Amen. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Commissioners, each of you received the minutes from the November 25th, 2014 meeting. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
And I'll second it for
Okay,
Can't hear you.
thank you.
testing, 1, 2, testing, 1, 2.
Thank you very kindly. We have a proper motion on the floor for the approval of the minutes from Commissioner Harvey, second by Commissioner Lible. Further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 3, employee recognition. Previous employees of the quarter and announcement of Employee of the Year. Our County Administrator, Mr. Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the time when we do take pleasure in announcing our Employee of the Year. So prior to doing that, what we would like to do is to recognize those employees who have been named the Employee of the Quarter for the previous 4 quarters. And I'd like to call their name and ask them to come forward and stand just behind the podium, please. First, I'd like to ask Ann B.O.C.C from General Services to come forward. Guy Holder from Emergency Services. Roger Westbury from Public Works. And Joel Willis from Information Technology. And before getting to the business at hand, I think this is being December the 9th. This is also coincidentally Ms. Holder's birthday, so happy birthday.
All right. Happy birthday.
Our employees of the quarter are selected by a committee that is appointed by the county administrator, and they are considered from among nominations submitted by other employees, and so we congratulate them for their previous recognition. This same committee also considers from among these 4 the Employee of the Year. So it is my pleasure to announce that their committee has selected Guy Holder from Emergency Services as the Employee of the Year.
Thank you for the acknowledgement and standing ovation by our elected officials as well as our audience that have gathered here. And we commend each of you for what you do every day. Oftentimes you're the thankless heroes and heroines in our community, yet we recognize and appreciate each day the contribution you make. And it's not just a come to work attitude that you have. What you do affects those around you, and because you exemplify what we appreciate in county government employees, we salute you and thank you so much. We also acknowledge the committee for seeing in you what we see in you, and that's the quality of what you do each day. So here on behalf of the entire county and those who lead, we present in recognition of your exemplary service to Putnam County as Employee of the Year, this plaque, and then also some appreciation that you may enjoy birthday, holiday, and all concerned. Thank you so much. And then I think he has a speech also. Speech.
All right, Guy.
Thank you all.
Remarkable, and we pray that all of our employees it will be contagious, that all will continue to shine to make our community better. Item 4, Tim Parker, property appraiser, the Honorable Tim Parker. Thank you for being here. He's presenting this morning Greenbelt Advisory Board member recognition. Thank you, Mr. Parker.
I don't think they're in audience.
Unfortunately, Mr. Coward, I did call him this morning. Is he here? I hadn't seen him here yet, so.
Wants to call you back.
Yes, if you would, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Parker. We will certainly do that. Item 5 on our agenda, and for the benefit of all that are here, the agendas are in a pocket on the wall, as well as the public meeting comment card. When you come in, you can certainly get that and fill those cards out if you choose. It is not a mandate, but it is very much appreciated. The portion of this agenda is designed to allow our citizens an opportunity to bring matters to our attention. It is not reasonable to expect that we will engage in debate or deliberation about the matters on which we have not received any prior information as a part of our agenda packet. We're asking that you please recognize the 3 minutes so that others who come behind you will have opportunity to speak what they would like. And in this particular order, we're asking that you please come. We do have the cards for the majority. Mr. Neil Letts will be first, and we have his address on file. Following Mr. Neil Letts will be Elizabeth Bacon-Smith, and then Ms. Wanda Ruckowitz, Mr. Robert Wise, Mr. Stephen Brodowski. Please come in that order. When one is up, then the other will please follow. Thank you. Mr. Letts.
Merry Christmas, and I hope we all live long, healthy lives and happy lives. This is my opinions, good or bad. Nobody else is responsible for it. I'll read a statement. Our county commission and its task force are stalled and confused in finding ideas for a solution to our skyrocketing solid waste costs and control of landfill poisons. Now, options include, the ideas can include the following. 5-fold expansion of tax-consuming landfill is an obsolete technology that cannot handle tires, must be taken off the table, since it takes valuable hydrocarbons and buries them where water and anaerobic bacteria create poisons such as benzene, methane, ammonia, chlorine, sulfur gases, and the arsenic toxic metals that combine to make leachate that will always leak somewhere and never can be treated satisfactorily, but only can be transferred elsewhere to persist indefinitely. This is treasure to toxins. Option 2, recycling means sorting specific plastics, paper, tires from each other and remelting the pure plastic to make new items and mixing the pure paper products in what a small proportion of new fibers to make new paper at half the cost. We should do this in our paper plant. Tires can only have their carbon hydrogen burned directly or converted into new fuel, trash to treasure. 3, Plasma Arc takes carbon and hydrogen abundant in tires, black liquor lignin from the paper mill, wood and plastics, and cooks them in a continuous lightning bolt voltage and high pressure vessel to get hydrocarbon fuel, traps sulfur, nitrogen, and chlorine, and ties up the arsenic heavy metals in melted glass slag that results from the sand impurity in the system, trash to fuel, and 300 jobs and tax money to the county. What's not to like? 4, railroad access is the only efficient means for transporting the 1,000 daily tons of waste to make any project economically possible. It also is vital in the short run to export our 200-ton daily solid waste elsewhere to buy time and develop and construct the 3-job creating hydrocarbon fuel factory and would serve to cease landfill expansion. In contrast of swarms of 20-ton trucks that would tear up our roads, one railroad car holds 100 tons of waste, and for example, Seminole imports 10,000 tons of coal or 100 cars daily. We could export all our problems elsewhere. The last paragraph I have, item number 5, this very much pains me, but Mr. Leary, who is responsible for creating and wanting to expand this bankrupting I'm sorry.
I want you to address the commission, not Mr.
All right,
Leary.
well,
You
I
can
want-
meet with Mr.
I've
Leary.
already talked to him eye to eye. I'll be
Okay,
glad
please,
to.
please continue.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you, sir.
But I want you to know,
Mr.
talked.
Letts.
Yes, sir.
Address this
Yes, sir.
commission. Thank you.
expand the bankrupting toxic mess over the last 15 years must be removed from his position. The Republic poisonous ball keeps bouncing back into our faces. I've asked him privately to resign in the interest of the county, and I'm again asking you to resign as he and
Mr.
you
Letts.
are totally unqualified
Mr.
to
Letts.
manage or give advice about solid waste management.
Mr. Letts.
May I finish one sentence? Any environmentally clean economic solid waste program with him involved is doomed to failure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Would you like to leave that with the clerk?
Huh?
Would you like to leave your paper with the clerk?
Sure.
Just a copy of it, please?
I got a bunch of
Okay.
them.
Listen, let me make sure that everyone understands, this is a county commission meeting, and in this meeting, we want you to always address this commission. Thank you so much. Okay? Ms. Elizabeth Bacon-Smith, please. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
First, congratulations, Carl, on your new chairmanship.
Thank you.
And this is my personal thank you to Chip Leibel and to Larry Harvey for your commitment and diligence in your work to raise the standards of Putnam County animal control with the goal of its becoming a no-kill facility. And to Lisa Suarez for her leadership as well, and the rest of the committee, of course. It's an issue that's very close to my heart, and I appreciate your sincere efforts. Thank you.
Mrs. Smith, if you would, add John Salmons on the staff. He is doing wonderful things with Lisa, and we're gonna meet our goals. Thank you for the
Thank you.
compliment.
Thank you so much.
I add John Salmon.
Good morning. I'm Wanda Ruckwitz, and I think you all know that I'm the president of the QI Roberts Band. Well, I'm here again to promote our Christmas concert, which is Monday at 6:30. Larry Harvey will be cooking our turkeys for our dinner, and we would like all of you to come, and I wanted to make it open so all of Putnam County would know. And I want to thank you so much for when you were there last year, or in October. This one will be just as exciting as that one. And we all want you to come, okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Wise.
My name's Robert Wise, Robert A. Wise. I was born and raised in this county. I've lived here most of 71 years, except what time I was with Uncle Sam. But what I'd like to bring a few things to the county commissioner's attention, some things I have a problem with. One of them is, I'm gonna start off with the, and I mean this, and it's just a comment. It's my personal opinion, is due to the actions of the county commission and others, my mortgage went up $20 a month because of the landfill assessment and various things. And I'm on fixed income. And there's a good percentage of this county that's on fixed income. And to raise a mortgage $20 a month To some people, that's drastic. I'm very fortunate I can be able to absorb that, but it's not good to my taste, okay? With that said, I'd like to address the issue of law enforcement, traffic laws. I can't understand why somebody can't do something about these pick 'em up trucks with the back end jacked down and the headlights sticking up in the sky. They'll blind you at night. You don't ask them for dims because they'll blind you worse with their brights. I can't understand how these, most of them are kids. Why that there's something can be done about it. And also for loud mufflers that's on these pickup trucks. They'll deafen you if you standing by them when they take off, because they're going wide open on 19, and they're going wide open on 20. And I just don't know why people can't do something about it. And also, I was gonna bring up turn signals, but they'd have to cite about 98% of the county about that. But I'll just let that one lie. The next thing I'd like to bring up is the environment. I just heard this gentleman first off talking about the landfill, how it polluted everything, you know. But has anybody rode down these county roads and these US highways and looked at the ditches and the power right-of-ways? What have they done? They sprayed all this stuff. I know what this is. This is just the same thing they sprayed in Vietnam. All it does is kill the vegetation. And the runoff goes into the ditch that goes into some waterway somewhere. There ain't a thing in the world said about this. But if you ride around, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's terrible, you know. And if a landowner decided he wanted to spray something and done all this, then EPA would be on their heads. They couldn't get by with it. And I just want to bring that to light. We talk about the pollution of the landfill, pollution of this and pollution of that, but nobody's paid any attention to the people that spray these right-of-ways and these ditches and the power lines. So I just like to bring that to the attention of the commission board, and maybe y'all can take some of this under consideration, you know. And I appreciate your time, and thank you for letting me speak.
Mr. Wise, it is our honor. Thank you so much for coming before us. We are noting your commentary. Okay. Mr. Brodowski. Good morning. Good morning.
It's so good to be back here again. I want to give you a chance to brag a little bit. Last time I was here, I mentioned how that if you have roads that are in bad shape, there's grants out there for that. If you have any kind of thing you want in your city or your county, including a transfer station, there's grants out there for all of that kind of stuff. What progress is there any progress anybody wants to brag about?
In the area of grants,
Yes, sir.
we have our eye on grants all the time, Mr. Brodowski. I mean, we really do.
Okay.
We couldn't get near the work done that we get as far as transportation corridors in the county if it weren't for grants. But we welcome any that we don't see, and you might see. We welcome you to bring them forward.
Okay. Who would I bring them
As a
to?
rural
You
county,
or
we need those.
should I bring them to Larry Harvey or to you?
The Public Works Department head, right there, Mr. Don Jacofovitz.
Okay, yeah, I know him. All right. The other thing I want to say is that I've done a lot of research on that paper that you gave me about the gasification process. The report that you handed me, I read it in detail, and my opinion is it was a high school kid that did it, or somebody equivalent to that. I wouldn't put any faith in that particular, discussion about gasification. I've done my research. I've got 4 years of chemistry behind me. I've got organic and inorganic chemistry. I know what's going on in the gasification process, and I'm not afraid of that process whatsoever. I welcome it to come into somebody's county somewhere. I'd like to see it come into this county because this is where I hang out. Okay, I'm just going to kind of leave it at that because we're running out of time here already. But this is a good process. I welcome y'all to look into it a little bit further. If you need any update on it, I've got that for you.
I would, if I could, Mr. Brodowski.
Yes, sir.
Could I encourage you to make an appointment with Dr. Tim Townsend at University of Florida on the gasification? Just he'll take a phone conversation with you. And
Okay.
also explore St. Lucie County, into their endeavor into gasification. I don't think anybody on the board agrees, that it's, not a usable technology. A lot of us believe it's an emerging technology. And I think the argument goes, where are we in that emergence? And that's the conversation I'd like to have with you. You
Okay.
know, we can't waste the taxpayers' money on emerging technology that's not here yet. I know you would agree with
Well,
that.
here's the beautiful thing. I hope you're not missing this point. Nobody from A-Page has asked anything from the county financially wise. They've just said, you know, would you give us a piece of land? I got a funny feeling that what's going to happen is Mr. Whitehead and his Republic company are going to come in. They're going to make a big mountain out of trash, and then a year or so later, he's going to mine all that trash out and put it in a gasification plant that he's going to build. I'm seeing that.
Wouldn't that be a win-win for both
That
of
would
us?
that would be a win-win for Republic, but what about the county? The county's going to lose out on all that money that.
If you could talk to Mr. Townsend, I would like to have a conversation with you
Well,
afterwards.
just so you know, I've spent at least 60 hours studying all the details about that I could get in my hands about gasification, and it's a beautiful technology. There's an advanced plasma technology, and then there's the laboratory type gasification that's been experimented with. It's not fair to try to compare anything that's done in a lab to something that's going to be done full scale in a massive operation.
Let me ask one more question, if I could, Commissioner.
Sure.
Mr. Brodowski, you have to ask yourself that if you were in the waste hauling business and you had to have a large land mass to store garbage, then, and that's the most advanced system there is with a liner to this, and collect the leachate, why wouldn't you want a gasifier if you could eliminate the huge cost of that land mass? You have to ask yourself that question. Why aren't they using the technology yet? Yet is the key word here. And I think it's emerging, I really do, but I just don't find a model anywhere. I know the one in Tees, England is being constructed right now, and I hope that's successful and will lead the way. But there's not one in the United States of America. There really isn't.
Well,
Advanced country.
I may be wrong, but I'm sensing a hesitation to, go forward on this. We've heard
Yes, sir.
the
We're
plea to
doing
let's
good
go
cause.
forward here so many times in this county commission, and then I see that this whole thing is being held up.
Just need an example.
If he was asking money from the county, I would say, well, yeah, we got to really think this thing out. But when he's offering to bring his money to the table and not ask for a penny, in fact, he's going to buy the property. I know you had a concern about the price of the property, but the bottom line I want to remind everybody is gasification technology is a money maker, a big money maker. When
Mr. Brodowski, summary, please. Summary. I'd like for you to come
well,
to
the summary is don't be afraid of this new technology. Westinghouse has built some incredible devices to, make gasification happen, and the technology is being improved all the time. So they can build a plant out here on Monday, and then on Friday they're going to be adding some new part to it to make it work even smoother. This is an engineer's dream,
Thank you so much, Mr. Brodowski.
and it's a money maker.
Thank you so much for your commentary. Thank you, Commissioner Liber, for your input.
Thank you for putting up with me.
Any citizens who who made the option not to fill out a comment card that care to come, please come forward. What's your name and address for the record? Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
John Spells, 106 Citrus Lane. I stopped back there just a while ago. I had one topic, but Binks, we back on the subject of the landfill. Okay, my thing is, y'all give the waste from the landfill a name of leachate, and really it's hazardous waste. So at the same time, y'all kind of put lipstick on something that's hazardous. Now, even if y'all do let Republic come in, right now, y'all really don't have a facility for maintaining the leachate that you're dumping in the storm drains now. But if he get it, what's gonna happen with all the hazardous waste? Well, I'm not saying leachate no more. What's gonna happen to all the hazardous waste? It's going into the drains, it's going into the river, it's going wherever y'all can actually, discard it at. And to me, it's very important, the future of the younger generation. And like I say, within another 20, 30 years, ain't none of us gonna be fit to do anything, but you don't take time to think about the younger generation. So you got to really give this here a little bit more consideration than what you all have said, because just like he said, if someone's willing to spend the money and sacrifice of doing something for the better good of the people, and you want to find more faults of what ain't been proven and all that, you got spaceships going to the moon, you got everything, but every time you look around, one of y'all want to knock it down. So what is the outcome of Trash Mountain eventually? You're going to have to clean it up. Putnam County going to be just a waste dump. You won't be able to drink no water. You won't hardly be able to breathe no air. But at the same time, everybody got what they wanted to get out the deal, and everybody else got to suffer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spell. Yes, sir. Morning.
Good morning. Hope everybody's well.
Yes, sir.
And Merry Christmas to everybody if we don't get to see each other next week or week after, or whichever. I just have a few questions.
Name and address for the record, please.
Robert Bly, 1 Sand Lake Drive, Pomona Park, Florida.
Thank you.
I'm wondering what originally caused us to have to mine cell 1 at the landfill. That was because of benzene poisoning, is from what I read in the paper. Is that right?
The original amount, if I could, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
It was not lined. Mr. Bly predates the federal regulations for landfill management.
And so that was where the benzene poisoning
Yes,
was
sir.
coming from,
As
and
a
that's
result
why
of
we decided
not
to.
having a liner, yes, sir.
Okay, and so there was a DEP mandate for us to go in and clean that up.
No, sir, there wasn't. It's a strong suggestion.
There was no mandate, no, sir.
Okay, so we went ahead and paid $27 million to a company to go in and clean up.
I don't think that figure quite matches, Mr. Leary, but yes, we have to clean up the benzene, mitigate the
Because we had a
groundwater
strong
contamination.
suggestion.
Yes, sir.
And so what's our current benzene level out there?
I couldn't tell you that. And I'm
We would
looking for
have
something.
to make sure that so that there are not a lot of different numbers being given.
Right.
That is something that really should be a one-on-one with our director.
Okay, well, I had
Certainly,
heard.
we can certainly arrange that, Mr. Bly.
I had heard a couple of different things, but that's why I asked you, because I thought maybe you'd know off the top of your
I
head.
have
but-
no prior knowledge.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, my issue is, I believe we had a 25-year time frame from the DEP to clean that up, mitigation for the
Never
benzene.
heard that.
No.
Never read it or seen it anywhere.
Okay.
Mr. Bly, if you have all of your questions written, we do not have any hesitation or reservation for any of our department heads to respond in a public forum, but all we request is that the questions are presented to them in advance, and we're not going to, as legislators, we're not going to be department heads and put ourselves out there with 5 different opinions or ways to present. So we're trying to tweak how we do our meetings to make sure that we're not reaction, we are responding, and when it's outside of our area of expertise, we do want the department heads who have the expertise to respond. So we don't have any problem at all with public questions. When those public questions come, it may be the next meeting. If you want a response publicly, you give us the questions. We will make sure that our administrator get it to the department head, and they can and will respond publicly. But the impromptu is where we have an issue, and that will not happen under my chairmanship. We will have order, and we will certainly follow procedure.
I fully agree. I did not mean to put you on the spot
Thank
here.
you, sir.
I thought these were questions that had been brought up in the past.
I know, but it's being brought up now, so you want an answer now. And in
Okay,
order
and
to
I
do
will in the
that, I would
future.
like, all due respect, as legislators, we're going to respect all of our department heads, and if you could, get with our clerk or get with someone, get those questions in, and you can put on your request, I want these answers in a public meeting of the commission, and we will accommodate. We're committed to that.
I will do that in the future.
Okay, thank
Merry
you so much.
Christmas.
Yes, sir. Merry Christmas to you and your family, sir. Are there any other public comments? Please come forward. Good morning.
Rick Haven, 115 Dowda Circle, Crescent City, Florida.
Good morning, Rick.
Harry Truman says the buck stops here. You guys were elected to do this job. If the heat is too much for you, Carl, then maybe you need to step down. But all right, on another subject, Chip mentioned Dr. Tim Townsend. Dr. Tim Townsend and the attorney you hired, Mr. D, were all board members on the Hinckley Center for the Solid Waste Management. Both of them had a bias in the issue. So I don't think Tim Townsend is the best one to be giving us information about whether or not the gasification is a viable option. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haven, and I appreciate your comments and the knowledge of knowing that the buck does stop here, and we will certainly keep that in mind. Please come forward.
Janet Smith, 60 Carefree Drive. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Morning, Jane.
Of all the options to take care of the garbage, with the exception, again, of either trucking it out or doing the gasification, it all results in Trash Mountain. If there's one thing the people as a whole of this county have said, they do not want Trash Mountain. So that right there should be an automatic thing not to consider anything else. The other thing that I'm wondering about is I cannot believe that the EPA, which seems to be getting stronger and stronger with more and more regulations, is not already thinking about shutting down landfills. We know there's problems with landfill and pollution. So has anybody really done research to see if the EPA is ready to shut down landfills? Anybody that doesn't think that that's a possibility hasn't been watching the EPA. And that said, that should really come into the decision, a good decision about what's best for this county. And it seems to me that if you also look at the numbers that have come out in the previous Citizens Task Force and also in the commission, is that the least expensive options, if you add all these up, by the figures that have come out in the meetings, the least things are to truck the garbage out or do gasification or both. For instance, the two least expensive options, which were trucking it out and the gasification, why not truck it out until the plant is built? The key here is maybe you don't trust this guy, but how about let's check it out further? And I mean, how about a contract, a real honest-to-goodness contract that is ironclad, that protects the county in every way that you can imagine if anything doesn't go to our liking? What worries me, and we've got people that can write those contracts. Mr. Griffin got up here and talked about the trouble with the contract with Republic. You can write contracts to protect the county. But what bothers me is if we go ahead and we do any of these other options that cost more money and end up with more trash, what happens if the EPA shuts us down and we've got that big trash mountain? Then what? Just saying.
Thank you so much for your comments. Any additional public comment? We will close the public comment section of this agenda, and we will call the Honorable Tim Parker back to our front.
Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to be here this morning. The Greenbelt Advisory Board is comprised of individuals from around our county, and their function is to give advice and recommendations to us when it comes to the granting of the Greenbelt classification on properties. These individuals are familiar and are experts from around our county, and we certainly value and appreciate their opinions. We have two members that are leaving our committee. This is Ken Cowart, and Ken has been serving for 25 years from 1989 to 2014. And we have a plaque that we'd like to present to Ken. It says, "In grateful appreciation for your exemplary service and dedication as a member of the Greenbelt Advisory Board, 1989 to 2014. So join me in thanking Ken for his service.
One thing I would like to say, please, that I do.
Come to the mic. Come closer to the mic.
I do thank Tim, wonderful organization, and he has been very instructive, one of the best, and I do thank you.
And we want to recognize his wife, Jean, and thank her for sharing Ken with us for all these years.
He's always looked forward to it. He's enjoyed it.
Thank you, Mr. Cowart.
Thank you so much. A quarter of a century of advice. Thanks.
Also, I would like to read into the record, we would also like to thank Charles Alford, and we do have a plaque for him as well, and so it reads, "In grateful appreciation for your exemplary service and dedication as a member of the Greenbelt Advisory Board from 1994 to 2014. And I believe Charlie could do this.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Parker, and thanks to all of those who serve on the various boards throughout our community, and especially the Greenbelt Advisory Board. At this time, I'm going to skip the consent agenda for 1 second and go over to the public hearing, number 8, Commissioners' Resolution electing to use uniform method of collecting non-ad valorem assessments. That is a 9:30 certain hearing, 9:38 now. And I'd like for the resolution to be read into the record. Commissioner Nancy Harris, will you please do that? And then we will open up the public hearing.
I will. A resolution of the Board of County Commissioners of Putnam County, Florida, electing to use the uniform method of collecting non-ad valorem special assessments levied under the unincorporated area of the county and within the boundaries of all municipalities, stating a need for such levy, providing for the mailing of this resolution, and providing for an effective date. Did you want me to read the whole thing? Okay.
Move the resolution.
Make a motion that we
Okay.
adopt the
Second.
resolution.
Okay. Now we are in a public hearing. At this time, we would like to invite any citizen that would like to speak concerning this resolution. Hearing none, we have a proper motion and a second for the resolution to be adopted. Further discussion.
I have none.
District 1?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes.
District 3? Yes. District 4?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
Resolution. Thank you very kindly. Commissioners, we will now go to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, you will find the list of committee minutes, recommendations distributed to become part of the record, list of correspondence distributed to become part of the record, cancellation of the second commission meeting in December. Administration brings the sale of surplus property at 210 Brantley Road. General Services, bid 1503 award for Ashley's Lawn Service in the amount of $85,120 for the mowing and groundskeeping services, 3-year contract through February 28, 2018. Public Works bid 15-05 award Coleman Construction $587,213.95 for the East Pinellas Street Road and drainage improvements, with the source being $484,650.29 of impact fees, $102,563.66 from the Better Place Plan funds. Item G, Public Works, Ashley Plantation Golf Cart Community Designation. H, Administration, request to release 1 acre from SHIP second mortgage for Mary Addison. I, Public Works, Florida Rural Water Association, and Polston Applied Technologies LLC cost-sharing agreement for the removal of sand grit from the Port Buena Vista wastewater treatment facility, $10,036, and the county share is $5,018 from the Water Sewer Fund. J, Public Works Supplemental Agreement Number 1, Florida Department of Transportation Small County Outreach Program, $212,900 for the widening and resurfacing of County Road 209 from West River Road to Palmetto Bluff Road. Commissioners, are there any items on the consent agenda that you need pulled for additional discussion?
Aye, please, Mr. Chairman.
Aye. Any others? I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda
Move
A through
approval.
J with an exception of I. Have a proper motion. Is there a
Second.
Have a second. Further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Like sign. Motion carries. Item I for discussion, Commissioner Lible.
Okay, Commissioners, pages 43 through 45, this is a very generous proposal. This, as you all know, the Port Buena Vista wastewater treatment plant has been somewhat a burr in our saddle for a long time. It's operating very well, and I know it needs its maintenance, and all I'm gonna ask for here is if there's any change orders, Mr. Leary, that we be notified. That's all I wanna know from this particular contractor. That's all I'm asking for. If he'll stay in the scope of work, I'll be happy.
I think that's very reasonable. Commissioner Lible, I think that needs to be official action from this board. We need to make sure, again, Port Buena Vista didn't just appear a few days ago, and the monitoring by Public Works and all concerned, I think that there ought to be progress reports that are submitted while this contract is open and is being fulfilled. I think it's properly noted by Mr. Jacobovich, those comments. Entertain a motion to approve the contract with the information and request that was made by Commissioner Lible.
Move approval,
Have a
Mr. Chairman.
proper motion and a second. Further discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Like sign. Hearing none. Motion carries. Thank you very kindly. Item 7, requesting modification to Shands Bridge over the St. Johns River. Commissioner Lible, if you would present this resolution to us, and then we will have some discussion.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, before I start reading the resolution, I want to thank Brandon Oliver from the Plaquemine Daily News this morning for bringing the public awareness to this situation and what it could truly be job or economic development-wise to the county. And thank you, Brandon. Okay, Putnam County Resolution number 2014-79 concerning Shands Bridge over the St. Johns River. Whereas the navigable waters of the lower and middle river basins of the St. Johns River, lying south of State Road 16 near Green Cove Springs and extending southerly into the lower and middle river basins, have historically been assessed by tall-masted ships. And whereas, since the construction of the Shands Bridge, such access has been denied due to the height of the bridge. And whereas shipbuilding industries and other types of maritime, commercial, and tourism development have been limited in the areas lying south of the Shands Bridge due to the height of the bridge. And whereas all bridges north of Sanford have a navigational vertical clearance of 65 and 160 feet with the sole expectation of the Shands Bridge at 45 feet. The current height of the Shands Bridge creates a limitation in preventing the growth of maritime-related industry and tourism in Putnam County and hinders plans and initiative to attract new marine-related businesses and tourist attractions to the region. And whereas any hindrance that prevents economic growth is detrimental to the long-term sustainability of our community. Now therefore be it resolved by the Putnam County Board of Commissioners that it does hereby request that the Florida Department of Transportation undertake the appropriate engineering analysis and evaluation to ascertain the required modification of the existing bridge that would allow maritime marine vessels, regardless of height, to pass freely from one side of the bridge to the other. And be it further resolved that the Putnam County Board of Commissioners does encourage said Department of Transportation to pursue an appropriation of funding adequate to achieve the modification identified in the engineering analysis and evaluation. This resolution is done, ordered, and adopted this 9th day of December 2014, and I offer it in the form of a motion, Mr. Chairman.
With a second.
I have a proper motion by Commissioner Libro and double seconds by Commissioner Pelletier and Commissioner Harris. Further discussion? District 1?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes.
District 4?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
District 3, yes. Unanimous. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
for
Commissioners.
promoting this and bringing a heightened level of awareness to all concerned. And it is our prayer that it is looked upon favorably for all to understand that our county's economics is tied to this very strongly. And so we do appreciate it. Okay. It's time. Item 9 on the agenda is our code enforcement. Mr. John Salmons is here. Do you need a moment for a setup, sir?
It always does.
First case is 2011-00864, 426 Himalayan in Interlaken. This is a request for abatement. As the photograph show, it's a very derelict mobile home. The property was first seen on October 21st, 2011. The tenant that was living there claimed it was unsafe, and it was deemed unsafe, and it has gone downhill since then. The special magistrate heard the case on February 16, 2012, and he ruled the case was in violation and gave the owner until April 23, 2012 to bring it into compliance. Nothing happened. We received information concerning new owners. The property continued to deteriorate, and the lien was attached on June 11, 2012. The special magistrate determined that the violation continued to exist and attached the lien on July 19th. The lien was recorded on August 12th. On August 21st, 2014, the special magistrate ordered the property either to be abated or foreclosed upon, and we're requesting your authorization to go ahead and get bids to abate the property.
Thank you, Mr. Salmons, for your presentation. Is the technology behind us? We're not seeing any on the screens.
Mr. Chairman, if you could ask if the applicant is here or has any.
Do we have anyone representing Jonathan Gibbs or Lisa McNeely on the 427 Himalayan Street Interlaken project? Is anyone here, neighbor, relative, friend, co-worker? Okay, each of us have reviewed this case number, 2011 00864. We do have it in our packets. Now our community citizens can see it as presented. Commissioners.
Let me know when you need a motion.
Offer.
So move approval of case number 2011-00864, the abatement.
I have a proper motion and a second. Further discussion. Had time to consider, ready to vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Like sign. Hearing none. This request is granted. Item B, abatement request, case number 2010-00444, Karen Morley, 216 Lake Lucy Crescent, Interlaken. If anyone is here with the Karen Morley concerning that case, interested party or the actual property owner, please come forward while this case is being discussed. Mr. Salmons.
This is 2010-00444, 216 Lake Lucy Drive, Lake Lucy Crescent Drive in Interlaken. This property was first seen on April 6, 2010. A woman was living in the mobile home without power and water. The floors were dilapidated and electrical wiring was unsafe. Special magistrate heard this case on July 15, 2010, and he ruled that the violation existed. And he gave the owners until September 20th, 2010 to bring the property into compliance. The lien was recorded on this property on November 9, 2010. On May 23rd, 2012, the special magistrate ordered the property to be either abated or foreclosed upon, and we are requesting to go forward with that now.
Thank you,
Nothing
Mr.
has
Salmons.
happened.
Second call, are there any interested neighbors or family members, anyone related to this case? Commission, what is your pleasure?
Move approval, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Proper motion and a second for abatement request, case number 2010-0044. Further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. This abatement request is granted. Item C, fine reduction request, case number 2012-00584, Josephine Gravely, 147 Depot Road, Hawthorne. Please, if you are here in any way, shape, form, or fashion connected to this case, please come forward while the presentation is being made. Mr. Salmons.
This property was first seen on October 12, 2012. There's an unsafe house on the property. Notice of unsafe structure was sent out on October 18th. The special magistrate heard the request on April 18, 2013, and ruled the violation did exist. Gave the owners until July 17th to bring it into compliance. The property did not come into compliance. The special magistrate determined the violation continued to exist after the time that he gave had passed, and the lien was attached on September 19, 2013. On January 16, 2014, the property ordered the property to be either abated or foreclosed upon, and we started down that process, and then we found out that a new owner had taken control of the property and would prefer to go with demolition. The owner's contractor pulled the demolition permit on June 16th, and the demo was finalized on July 18th. On November 20th, the special magistrate concurred with the recommendation of staff to reduce the fine from $9,100 to $1,401 if it's paid within 90 days of Board of County Commissioner action. And that's based upon the fact that the granddaughter of the original owners got control of the property and cleaned it up in a timely manner.
Thank you so much, Mr. Salmon. Second call, is there anyone here related to this particular case? Commissioners, we do have a recommendation from the special magistrate. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move approval on case number 2012-00584.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Further discussion? At time to consider, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Like sign. Hearing none. Motion carried. Item D, fine reduction request, case number 2011-00407 and case number 2009-00266, Scott Douglas, 2009, Roselle in Palatka. If there's anyone here, please come forward while this case is being presented.
This property was first seen on July 13, 2011. We also had an older case that had languished, and we ended up closing that case and going with this case. Basically, it deals with unpermitted construction. The notice of violation hearing was sent out on July 20, 2012. No permit was pulled for the construction activity. Staff met with the owner prior to the hearing before the special magistrate. He indicated that the bank was looking to foreclose on the property. So that's why he didn't follow through on the permit. This special magistrate on September 15, 2011 found the property still to be in violation. He gave the owner on March 15, 2012 to bring it into compliance. Nothing happened and the lien was recorded. On July 10, 2014, the property appraiser's records showed that a new owner had the control of the property. We sent him out a courtesy notice and he pulled the permit and promptly removed the unpermitted construction. The special magistrate heard this request on November 20th, 2014, and concurred with the staff's recommendation to reduce the property from $21,700 to $779 for was paid in 30 days of Board of County Commissioner action.
Thank you, Mr. Salmon. Second call, is there anyone here related to discuss this case connected in any way, shape, form, or fashion to the case that is being presented? Commissioners, we do have a recommendation from the special magistrate. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move approval on cases 2011-00407 and 09-00266.
Proper motion
Second.
and a second. Further discussion? We've had time to consider. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Again, the request is approved based upon the recommendation. Item E, fine reduction request, case number 2009-00775, Gerald Brent Schism, 1004 Dawn Avenue, Interlaken. If there's someone here related to that case, please come forward and stand in the front while this case is being presented.
Property was first seen on July 25th, 2007. The house was gutted from a fire. Notice of hearing was sent on January 8th, 2008. No permit was pulled for rehabilitation of the home. Property first went before the special magistrate on March 20th, 2008, and he found the property to be in violation and gave the owner till April 21st, 2008 to bring the property into compliance. Nothing happened, and the lien was recorded on June 9th, 2008. Nothing continued to happen. On July 16, 2013, Wells Fargo let staff know that they were in foreclosure on the property. Staff put the case on hold while the lease pendants was active. On October 15, 2014, staff was contacted by the new owner. Kevin Powell rechecked the property. He's our building official, as you know, and found that the new owner had brought the property into compliance. Mr. Drew requested a fine reduction hearing, and the special magistrate on November 20th, 2014 concurred with the recommendation to reduce the fine from $58,875 to $540 if it's paid within, it says 30 days there, but I think it was 60 days that we finally concur on for the payment. And I believe he's here.
Okay, Mr. Johnny Drew.
No.
Mr. Sism.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Sism.
I mean, Mr. Schism, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Turn the page.
Morning.
Yeah, Schism. Are you in agreement with the recommendation?
Actually, when I was here last month, the agreement was more than that, but yeah, I'm very happy with that number.
You want to pay more?
I just, all honesty, yeah.
Okay.
All right, so I want to make sure that I'm on point. The recommendation here is to accept what amount?
$667,
Yeah,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Simon said something else, so it sounded like.
Oh, okay, that's,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
yep, you're on the,
John, did
that
you
was
read?
Johnny Drew's.
I think you were reading
I think you read
from-
something else, Mr. Simon.
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
I think you were reading the caption from the one that I kind of flipped over to as well. So the actual amount that is in the record is $667 to be paid within 90 days, is that?
Okay, yep.
Okay, so your discount no longer applies. Do you have any objections or any concerns that you need to bring to our attention outside of this recommendation?
My one question is after having trying to move in and everything, it has cost me more than I thought it was. What happens if I'm not able to pay that before the 90 days is up?
You really don't want the answer. I'm just teasing.
No, you can.
Do you, obviously the office has worked with you and we're elated to have you as a citizen to take
Yes.
charge and to step up and to make this happen. What do you think is going to be your?
Well, I'm going to do everything I can to have it paid, by then. But like I said,
Okay. Let's stick with the agreement that is recommended. If you are running into any special crisis then certainly touch bases with Mr. Salmons, and then he will bring it to our attention. But I certainly favor us sticking with the recommendation.
Mr. Sism, thank you for cleaning it up.
Appreciate it.
not a
Really do.
problem.
We're trying to get a lot of that done out that way.
I'm
pleasure.
doing my best.
Case number 2009-00775. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of case number 2009-00775.
Second.
Okay, we have a proper motion and second. Further discussion? We had time to consider. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign? Hearing none, our request is granted. Item F, thank you, 2007-00738, Johnny Drew, 239 Pecan Grove Road, Palatka. Mr. Salmons, anyone that's related
I'm on
to
the
this
right page
case,
this time.
please come forward and stand with us.
This
Yes.
property was first seen on July 25th, 2007. The house was gutted from fire. I think I probably just read this on the last one, but notice the hearing was set on July 8th, 2008. There was no permit pulled for rehabilitating the house. Basically, I don't know, we already read this. So basically, the property is brought into compliance, and the special magistrate and staff recommended that the $58,875 fine be reduced to $540 if it's paid within 60 days.
Okay, thank you for presenting the case. Please come forward, state your name, whoever is the spokesperson, name for the record, and then I'll have a question for you after you introduce yourself.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
morning.
I'm Donald W. Fryer. I live at 105 Pecan Grove Road. This is my daughter, one and only. She's going to be the resident of 109 Pecan Grove Road currently, and we would like to say thank you. This is her first home purchase, and we have purchased this as is, and it needs lots of work, and we've been doing lots of cleanup. I have some pictures if anybody would like to look, and we graciously accept the most reduction possible. She has already spent half the money purchasing the property that she has available to do any and all repairs.
Okay. So do you have any objections to the special magistrate's recommendation for the 549, and it is 60 days?
Yes, that's what.
Okay, thank you so much. Commissioners, you've heard the case as presented. You have a recommended action. There is no objection. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move approval on case number 2007-00738.
Second.
I have a proper motion and a second. Further discussion? We've had time to consider. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Congratulations. and
Congratulations.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for your investment.
Thank you for
Amen.
buying here.
Thanks. Okay, our next case is item G, fine reduction request, case number 2011-00028. Ms. Jane Malphurs, if you'll please come forward while your case is being presented. 250 Pomona Landing, Pomona Park. Mr. Salmons.
This case was first seen on January 21st, 2011. There was a large amount of tree debris, junk and debris on the property. Courtesy notice was sent to the owner at the time on February 3rd, 2011. Meetings with that owner, who actually owns the property next door also. Nothing positive really happened. He's still a problem. More junk and debris was brought on the property. Special magistrate found the property was in violation, and he gave Mr. Thomas until July 28, 2011 to bring the property, or excuse me, September 28, 2011 to bring it into compliance. Nothing happened. A limited liability corporation purchased the product on tax deed sale, and then Ms. Malphurs purchased the property and spent over $4,000 cleaning the property up. A mess that she had nothing to do with. We currently still have a lien on Mr. Thomas, so we've recommended that, and the staff, special magistrate concurred, that the $27,450 fine be reduced to $112 if it's paid within 60 days for the reasons given. Ms. Malphurs is here.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Salmons, for presenting this case. Ms. Malphurs, if you'll introduce yourself, and then I have a question for you.
Jane Malphurs, 250 Pomona Landing Road.
Thank you so much for being here. You see the recommendation that is before you. Do you have any heartburn or any issues related to this recommendation?
No, not at all.
So there is no objection?
No objection.
Okay, you have any other comments you want to share?
No, that's all.
Thank you for being here. If you just stand by for just a moment. Commissioners, you've heard the case as presented. You've also heard that there's no objection by this fine citizen. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to concur with the recommendation from the special magistrate.
Second.
We have a proper motion and a second that we are in concurrence, and also we have the blessings of the property owner. Further discussion?
Just like to compliment you for taking a very rundown property and cleaning it up, making our county look better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
We're
you.
kind of proud of it.
And,
It's been
since
it's
we
been
are-
an experience.
It's my own commentary, reading the details and really looking at the magnitude of what you encountered, and the more you thought you knew, the less you've discovered that you knew as you continue this project, and you did not give up there because of the pride that you have as a Putnam County, and we salute you for that.
Well, this land was important to our family, but for our children, because in generations past, it belonged to my husband's grandfather.
Yes, ma'am.
And we didn't, we just didn't like to see it like that.
Yes, ma'am.
So-
And well, there's a lot of people that don't like it, but they don't step up. You stepped up. Further discussion, deliberation by this commission?
None.
Time to consider. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations and thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, we really do appreciate it. Mr. Salmons, anything else?
That'll do it.
We have a 10 o'clock certain public hearing. It is 10:06. We will continue moving. Number 10, public hearing, planning and development services, Harris Burns Cato, Planner 2. As the planner is coming to us, we will be discussing case number PV-14-001, Saul's vacation of plat and easement of the quote Underwood addition to Lake Highlands. And you will
Mr.
find that
Chair?
on page 106. Yes, sir.
While Mr. Harris is setting up, Mrs. Harris and I would like to request a break.
Okay, while the setup is taking place, we will have a 5-minute break, and please stay tuned to this station. Please continue, sir.
He's kicking them on down.
Development Services, our planner is here to discuss this case. If you would, please present this to us. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Harris Burns Cato Plan Development Services is
Mic closer.
closer. Thank you. This is plat vacation 14001. The applicants are Bobby and Janice Sauls, Carl and Lindy Butts. The Underwood addition to Lake Highlands subdivision was recorded 88 years ago. In 1926, the subdivision has not been developed in accordance to Map Book 3, page 152. In fact, I'll show that to you right now. The Underwood addition to Lake Highlands subdivision meets the definition of antiquated subdivision under Florida Statute 163.3164, Section 5. Blocks 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the subdivision contain 17 lots and 2 public right-of-ways, which are proposed to be returned to acreage. The 3.9 acres, plus or minus, will be replatted into 3 parcels, each greater than 1 acre. There's a survey that I'll show that explains that. These actions comply with the Land Development Code, Comprehensive Plan, and Florida statutes pursuant to Florida Statute 177.101. The taxes for the property are current, and the request has been advertised. There are 2 primary dwelling units and multiple accessory structures in subject location. Future improvements to the 3 parcels will only be permitted once the owners have demonstrated compliance with the Land Development Code. So I want to go over some of the maps that are associated with the property. Right now, we're looking at a survey of Map Book 3, page 152, which comes from 1926. The outlined red area is the area that is subject to vacation. Here's an aerial of that same, of the subject properties. And you can see the primary residence and structures. And here is the survey of the replat. And under it, you can see where the previous subdivision was. The future land use, homogeneous, rural residential, and the zoning is R1 for the area. And the replat areas, they meet the criterion. They're 1+ acre, and also they're over 75 feet of road frontage. Staff recommends approval of case PV 14001 to vacate blocks 2, 3, 4, and 5 and public right-of-ways of Underwood additions to Lake Highlands, recorded plat, Map Book 3, page 152, and return to property acreage, then replat the 3.9 acres into 3 parcels consistent with the attached survey in Exhibit D of the staff report.
Okay, thank you very kindly for the presentation. At this time, we are opening the public hearing for the benefit of any concerned property owners, anyone that is adjacent, contiguous in any way, shape, form, or fashion that has an interest or a concern on this case, which is the vacation of recorded plat and easements for the Underwood addition to Lake Highlands. This public hearing is open. This public hearing is now closed. We will go directly to our commissioners. We would like to ask anyone who have had any ex parte communication to please disclose it at this time.
I've had none.
I had none.
I've had none.
I've had none. I've had none.
Commission deliberations. You've heard the presentation from our planner, discussion and deliberation and action.
Mr. Chairman, I think that this is a win-win situation. We're taking an antiquated subdivision and making one that is allowed under today's records. And the people have come forward to do it. And I make a motion, if no one minds a motion right now, that we approve this.
We have a proper motion by Commissioner Harris.
Second.
We have a proper second by Commissioner Harvey. Further discussion. Have time to consider. District 1?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes.
District 4?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
District 3? Yes. Thank you very kindly. Anything else, sir?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you very kindly. This time we have appointments. Our county administrator has pressed us to take care of the essential issues that we have. I would like to know whether there are any appointments for Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. I am recommending Mark Lenity be reappointed as the at-large Essential Services. I'm also recommending William McCormick be submitted as an appointee for District 3. Any other appointments, Affordable Housing Advisory?
Just to comment on, for mine in District 5, I've contacted Mr. Bates, and he is helping me locate a replacement for himself.
Okay, are you on Better Place?
I'm sorry, I'm on Better Place. I'm
Okay, we're
sorry.
moving now to Better Place Plan Oversight, District 1. Do you have an appointee?
I do not.
Okay. District 2, do you have an appointee?
I do not.
District 5, you are working. Okay, we go to CDBG Citizens Advisory Task Force, 4 appointments, 51% from low, moderate income households. Do we have any appointments from CDBG?
I can't find any.
Okay, we do want to make sure, and maybe we need to enhance the advertisement on that. It is very crucial. It's very important that we fill this task force. Administrator has made it plain to us there, so we're appealing to our citizens there. We certainly do have the information on the Community Development Block Grant Citizen Advisory Task Force, and it's so important because we do not meet, they do not meet on a regular basis, but they meet as needed to review potential applications and to make sure that we are in compliance with the regulations concerning that. Okay, Contractors and Building Trades Examiners Board, we need a consumer representative for that vacancy. Do we have an appointed?
I do not, sir.
I do not either.
All right, I'd like to nominate Carl Davis to fill Contractors and Building Trades Examiners Board. Library Board, 1 appointment, District 3. We have a citizen who termed out. I'm nominating Roberta Sprague to fill that vacancy. Planning Commission at large. I also would like to recommend that Mrs. Leota Wilkinson be reappointed. Zoning Board of Adjustments, do we have any?
None, sir.
We have 2 that expires December 31st, 2014. Are there any, is there any consideration for reappointing?
Yes, I've talked to Ms. Player, and she would take that position again.
Okay, so you are recommending her for
Yes.
reappointment. Is
Yes.
there a recommendation for the other at-large appointment? Is there a reason not to recommend?
Let's put her in there.
Let's,
She's a very good member, both
okay,
those
well,
names.
let's do that, and let's make sure that it's understood how much we appreciate the services that are being rendered. So we do have a recommendation for reappointing Ms. Linda Osborne as well as Susan Player. Any other recommendations for appointment? I'd like to entertain a motion to appoint all of those that have been mentioned for the various boards that are before us.
So moved.
Have a proper motion.
Second.
Second, further discussion. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Hearing none. County Administrator, Mr. Leary.
Mr. Chairman, I have one item that was provided to me after the agenda was prepared. Had I received it in time, it would have been on the consent agenda item, but it's an application from Emergency Medical Services for 100% grant funding for pre-hospital enhancement of their EMS system for scheduling of personnel, software programming. It's $6,921, which requires adoption of a resolution authorizing the chairman's signature on the grant application.
Mr. Chairman, move approval that we accept that grant.
Second.
We have a proper motion and a second that the grant be accepted. I'd like just a little bit more discussion on the timing, and although we're just getting it, help me understand what happened as it relates to the timing of that, because we do have to make sure that that those factors are done and that we do have some technical. Okay.
I guess if you don't do it today, we're gonna lose the money. I mean, is that what you're talking about?
No, sir, I do understand that. I'm not understanding why you're just getting it.
Well, I'm just getting it because Mr. Patterson just provided it to me on, after the agenda was prepared on Wednesday afternoon. He didn't get it to me until Thursday morning.
Okay. All right, sir.
And if we don't act on it today, since
No,
you're
no,
not
I'm-
meeting
I'm-
again this month.
No, sir, that is not my issue. My issue is not whether we're gonna act on it or not. My issue is whether or not we actually have the document to review, and we are in session, you know, later on today, and I just like to be able to look at it there, but it's fine. I have a motion and a second on the floor. Discussion?
I'm good.
I have none.
I like the word 100% financing.
I do too.
Call the
I
question
love it.
phrase.
It's no doubt in my mind, I love it, but at the same time, I just wanna make sure that department heads and everybody know that we need documentation there that we can visually see. I have confidence in the chief, I have confidence in our administrator that what is being presented has been properly vetted, but I just wanna make sure that that information is to us timely.
Call for question.
Call the
Question
question.
has been called. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Leary?
No, sir.
Okay. County Attorney, Mr. Castleberry.
No, sir, that'll be this afternoon.
Okay. Clerk of the Court, Tim Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have an item we'd like to discuss with you, and that is the interim financing for the cost of construction for the jail. Mr. Jones has done an analysis and gone out for bid, and I'm going to turn it over to him for an explanation of the process here.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim. Last month, we requested proposals from 4 separate banks. We received proposals from Capital City and SunTrust. Each presented an identical fixed rate of 1.43% for a loan fully funded up front. Capital City, however, was $1,000 higher on closing costs. SunTrust also presented a second option, what they call their option B, based on funds being drawn down only on an as-needed basis at a variable interest rate of 67% of 1 month LIBOR, which is currently 0.16%, plus 128 basis points, or 1.39% at the current rate. This interest rate will reset the first of each month based on the prevailing rate. We performed an analysis based on estimated cash draws needed based on projections from the construction manager. If rates remain constant, which they won't, the county would save approximately, well, over $100,000 based on projected interest costs under this option. The potential downside would be that if the interest rates were to rise quickly and severely during this the 15-month term of the loan. Included in the analysis are projections at 1.5% with LIBOR at 0.32%, which is double the current rate, and 2% with LIBOR at 1.08%, almost 7 times the current rate. Both still suggest substantial savings. Historically, 1 month LIBOR has remained below 0.35% for the last 4 years. On the back of your analysis is a chart that reflects the historical levels. Based on this, we recommend that you accept the SunTrust option B. The potential savings are substantial. The county would, however, be subject to some interest rate risk.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Lible?
Mr. Jones, I know in the original document I read, with the capital city financing proposal, there was not a paid penalty. Does that stand the same with SunTrust?
That is the same for SunTrust.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions?
And I ask that only because if the interest rate were to skyrocket, we'd have that option to pay it and avoid it. Is that correct, or will we?
We will be paying this interim financing from the USDA bonds, which will be issued after the construction is complete. So I don't know where we'd get the funding.
So this is interim financing for the construction project. You don't sign the bond until the project's complete, which is then your long-term financing. So if we went out for bid, we would still be subject to the same rate analysis and the current rates.
I understand. I was
during
just
that time.
thinking, I forgot it's not coming from our coffers. Right. Thank you for the correction.
Okay, we have a proper recommendation from the clerk's office. Mr. John Jones, thank you for your thorough explanation and presentation on the cost analysis for the interim financing for the Putnam County Jail project. Any further commission deliberations?
Go ahead.
I was going to make a motion that we accept SunTrust option B.
We have a proper motion on the table.
Second.
We have a proper second on the table. Further discussion? District 1?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes.
District 4?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
District 3? Yes. Thank you very kindly. Really do appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I have one other item, please.
Yes, sir.
Since we're at the end of the calendar year, and I wanted to give you an update on our courthouse renovations that have been going on. First, I want to let you know how much I appreciate working with Mr. Leary and Mr. Anderson on this. And these dollars that we've been using to renovate this building that was originally constructed in 1909 comes from dollars that were accumulated over many years from appropriations from the legislature, general appropriations called Small County Courthouse Improvement dollars. Those dollars quit coming our way back when the economy started to turn. But because of the good stewardship of Mr. Leary and Mr. Anderson, those funds had been segregated and had been kept for that work. And we had a fairly lengthy discussion with the chairman last year about this project. The courthouse is one of the most significant buildings in downtown Palatka. We are a resident of a viable area. We want to do our part to be good citizens and to maintain our presence downtown. We think it adds to the character, the historic nature, the flavor of downtown Palatka. So we're very excited about that. But this building being a 1909 construction has its challenges. And I've told the story that it's like if one of your motor graders needs a motor replaced, but you have to use it every day from 8 to 5. And so it's been a challenge. And so part of my discussion is I also want to recognize the great effort of Mr. Kenny Downs, who is a contractor by trade, who has overseen this work. None of this work really is structural, it's more cosmetic, but we're really changing the view and the look of the courthouse. A lot of people assume that most folks that come into the courthouse are criminals, and I will tell you that it's a minute part of the people that come in that building are actual criminals. These are citizens of our county that need access to the courts, and they come in there, and first of all, it is an intimidating place to come into because it's a legal process that folks generally don't understand, and there's some anxiety when they come in, and then the first thing you see is guards at the door, metal detectors, and those types of things. So our staff has worked hard to try to minimize the anxiety folks when they come in there. And generally, they're coming to one of our offices to start with, and that's how you get in this process. But we're also required to bring that building up to the digital world. because we now operate with electronic files and images, and those images in the next few months will become available to the general public from their home or their business. They'll be able to begin to see those images. So it's interesting when you see some work going on and they remove ceiling tiles. You just can't believe the network of cables and wires that run unseen in that building. But there's also the technology component of what's been done in that building. So not only the cosmetic and the part that makes it more of an inviting place for our public to come in there, but that technology component that is necessary to continue to do our work as we're directed to by the legislature and the Supreme Court. And so most of this work is done after 5. They work most nights till midnight or 1 o'clock. Then they work on the weekends. And so if you go in there, as I've done many times at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and you just see the chaos up and down the hallway, and then you come back the next morning at 8:30 when they unlock the door, and it looks like nobody was there. It's really an amazing task that's been going on there, and Mr. Downs has really overseen that, and so we're very thankful for that. And then as we move forward with the jail construction, it's valuable for us as your comptroller and your finance officer to have someone that has contracting knowledge and knows the language, as we now will be required to audit and process those payments that will be coming to us for payment as the construction moves on. So just a lot of good work. And then I'll finish up with our goal is to have an open house in April. And we are going to invite the public to come down and come through the courthouse and see the improvements, and we hope that they'll appreciate that. And this should set that building, you know, for several decades to be completely functional and up to speed. But I don't think we're through, because as we talked with the chairman last year, Commissioner Lible, we do want to, as we can identify funds in the future, look at some improvements to the outside appearance of that and try to bring it back more to what a historic look of that building was. And then let me conclude with, I saw last night that Steve Kite, who's been taking some really beautiful photographs of historic buildings around the county, took one of the courthouse. We restored and renovated our 14-year-old wreaths that we put on the columns, and it really is a spectacular picture, so I hope that you'll all be able to see that. So I just wanted to give you that update as we move towards the end of this calendar year, and we look forward to more success next year. And thank you to the administrative staff here that supports this effort, and also to Danny, who oversees building maintenance. Sometimes we butt heads on how to do things, but that's part of this. But they've got a great crew down there that assist in that, and we continue to work forward for the betterment of that building, because we know in the end that our job is to serve those people that come in the front door, and that's our task. So I thank you for giving me a few minutes for that update.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
If I could thank Mr. Smith and Mr. Downs. It does look great. It really does. And your continued effort, you're really taking that whole building and bringing it up at a great value to the taxpayers of the county. And the only other thing I want to ask you, my disco ball idea, the entrance, did you scrap that?
I would hope so.
We didn't think that was really a good idea.
Yeah, that's.
Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for sharing the information with the revisions and the revitalizations that are taking place there, because it is a cornerstone for the entire downtown, and I'm sure that the citizens of our city and our county, as well as our municipalities in the outlying areas, are grateful, because it does serve all of us, and it serves all citizens that are in state, out of state, who need the services. And so thank you. Thank you. Any further comments from the clerk's office? So, thank you. Okay. District 5 Commissioner, do you have any comments?
No, sir, I do not.
District 4?
I do, Mr. Chairman. I did attend the Animal Services Committee, and I was pleasantly surprised at the progress that Animal Services is making. One of the things that I'm really excited about under Mr. Libel's, our honorary member there, and is putting on the website the animals. And if you're interested in an animal, you'll be able to click on that animal, and in the future possibly put a hold on that animal. So nothing could happen to that animal while you're thinking about it or showing it to your neighbor or your wife or something like that. So there was a lot of interaction there, and I would encourage the public to really look at that website. I think it's a fascinating way we're going with animal services. And
What's
I
the name of the
applaud
website?
Do what?
What's the name of the website?
Putnam Paul's.
Putt Pets.
Putt
Pets.
Yeah, Putt Pets. So, yeah, but it's really, it's very interesting, and I tell you,
.com.
I've been hearing a lot of negative, and I was so excited to hear some positive there, and a lot of good things are happening. On another note, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Lible, I would like to say this. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I did go to the University of Florida. I did talk to Dr. Townsend, and just to kind of set the record straight, they do have an arc plasma thing that they bought. They bought it from Georgia Tech. They haven't developed it to the class that it needs to be developed at yet, but they're working on it. And it is emerging, and at the meeting that I was at with him, he said it will be a few years down the road, possibly 10 to 15 years, is what he told me would be when this is up and running. Hopefully that would be sooner than that, but everybody's looking at it, I can tell you that. And I believe, I even spoke to a gentleman from DEP, Florida Department of Environmental Protection, up in Tallahassee last week, and they would like to see emerging technology come to pass too one day. It's just not there yet. So I just wanted to kind of set the record straight. And from this commissioner to you, I would like to wish everybody Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and we'll see you next year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much. District 2.
Yes, it's my turn. I think I said enough today. Merry Christmas, everyone, and hope you have a great New Year.
District 1.
I just want to echo that and hope you have a wonderful family holiday and have a lot of joy.
Thank you, District 1. Again, on behalf of the entire Board of Commissioners, to all of our citizens, to all of our administrative staff, to all of our departments throughout our county, to all of those who are interconnected and interrelated with what we do, we cannot successfully achieve the things that need to be achieved to enhance quality of living for our community without all of us working together. We have some challenges ahead of us, but by the grace of God, working together as a team, we will engage in healthy debate from time to time. That's all good. When it's all said and done, we will leave as one team moving us forward. So Merry Christmas to all and a prosperous New Year. At this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to recess this meeting with the understanding that we will reconvene at 1:30 p.m. today.
I make a motion to recess.
Second.
Blessed day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Merry Christmas. Probably not.
I'd like to welcome each and every one of you all into our afternoon proceedings. We have some specific instructions that will be presented to us through our county attorney, and we will follow those instructions. There is no need for anyone to think that an applause is required or any comments to anyone else's commentary. We ask that all of us follow the processes and procedures of this legislative body, and we will give you our full attention as you speak. And we ask the audience to do the exact same thing. Give full attention to the speaker, and please do not make any comments while another speaker is speaking. We also ask that in the rear of the room on a wall pocket, there's a public meeting comment card for those who feel like they will need to make some comments. So far, we do have 2 comment cards. It is not a requirement there, but if you choose to speak, we would prefer to have your information on file for the benefit of post communications to this meeting. This meeting is a quasi-judicial meeting. This is a public hearing. We will hear you. We do ask that you make your comments as precise as possible, which means that you will be allotted after we get through the initial comments with the summary of proceedings and recommendation. After we hear from counsel for all concerned here, when we get into public comments, there will be a 3-minute expectation on your part. And the only way that we will go past the 3 minutes is that it is requested and it is consensus among the legislators that are here. At this time, I'd like to divert our attention to the comments and the summary of why we're here by our county attorney, Russ Castleberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're here today on a proceeding under section 70.51 of the Florida statutes. To my, to my knowledge, it's the first such proceeding the county's been involved in. It relates to a special use permit application filed by the Boy Scouts, which was denied by our zoning board of adjustment back in July 2013. Instead of appealing to court, which they had the right to do, the Boy Scouts chose to implement this section 70.51 administrative proceeding, which is designed to try to come to some accommodation rather than fighting it out in court. Mr. Raymond Spofford was appointed by the parties to this proceeding are basically the county and the Boy Scouts of America. The neighbors, the affected neighbors were heavily involved by design to in this whole process, and a group of neighbors have hired Mr. Woodward to represent their interest in this matter, and they were essentially treated as parties also. We're actually here today ultimately to discuss Mr. Spofford's recommendation and try to come to some decision on that. But since this is the first section 70.51 proceeding the county has done, the attorneys involved encountered some procedural issues along the way that we have not come to full agreement on. If we're able to reach a deal today that everybody agrees to, those issues kind of go away for the most part. But in case we don't, Mr. Woodward has requested the opportunity up front to just make those procedural type issues part of the record, and I've agreed to that. So I'm going to invite Mr. Woodward to come up and address the procedural issues. Mr. Ansbacher is counsel for the Boy Scouts. I saw him, there he is over there. I'll ask Sid to come up after Mr. Woodward if he wants to respond to that. And then we will make a decision based on Mr. Woodward's procedural type issues. And then, depending on that decision, get into the real substance of the matter.
Okay, Counsel, you said that following Mr. Woodward, Mr. Ansbacher will come next?
As just for, if he has anything to say regarding Mr. Woodward's procedural. I'm trying to get the procedural, and I know this is a little bit of change from what I gave you, and I apologize for that, but I think it is important to get the procedural issues on the record up front and a decision to proceed or not to proceed. And Mr. Woodward is going to present his views. If Mr. Ansbacher would also have the opportunity, he will have an opposing view, is my guess. And then I will give the board my recommendation on how we proceed from there. And then we would turn to Mr. Spofford for his summary of his recommendation and sort of go back to the outline that we have.
Okay, thank you so much, Counsel. Mr. Woodward, if you will state your name and address for the record, and please keep your commentary on procedural issues as stated.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Michael Woodward, the firm of Kaiser & Woodward, 501 Atlantic Avenue, Interlochen. I'm appearing today on behalf of adjacent landowners Susan Vonderheide, Gerald Warren II, Katrina Warren, Maria Bloom, James Burke, Brian Gregory, Lindy Burke. It is my duty at this time to make objection to this proceeding going forward today before the Board of County Commissioners. Please do not be offended. This does not come from any reluctance on my part to address this body. And of course, I understand you've all likely been looking forward to wrestling with this issue this afternoon. Rather, the objection is based on the fact that it appears to me, under my analysis, that under Putnam County's Land Development Code and Section 70.51 of the Florida statutes, this matter, this process, properly belongs with the Zoning Board of Adjustment and not with the Board of County Commissioners. The Zoning Board of Adjustment is the necessary and proper party to this proceeding. It never should have been the Board of County Commissioners. The Board of County Commissioners also has, under its own land development code and under 7051, no quasi-judicial or quasi-appellate authority in this matter. In arriving at that conclusion, I assure you I did not arrive at it easily or as a matter of convenience. I looked at the following things. I looked at the Land Development Code. I looked at the language of Florida Statute 7051 itself. I looked at other statutes that defined the term government entity, which, as I will explain shortly, is the pivotal critical term at issue here. And I also looked at case law, interpreting and applying Section 7051 of the Florida statutes. You may recall, those of you who have either been on the board for a long time or have followed these matters, that at one time, and this is going back 12 or more years ago, at one time, the Zoning Board of Adjustment's decisions as to special exceptions, which we now call special use permits, were appealable to the Board of County Commissioners. Under that arrangement, the decision of the Zoning Board of Adjustment was not the final county decision. That decision would come potentially from the Board of County Commissioners on a quasi-appellate process. If that were still the situation today, the party bringing this proceeding, the Boy Scouts, would have been required first to exhaust their administrative remedy, appeal this to the Board of County Commissioners, and then the Board of County Commissioners would have become a proper party. However, about 12 or more years ago, this body, the Board of County Commissioners, you, your predecessors, chose to remove themselves from any involvement in special use permit decision-making, completely delegating full and final authority to decide special use permit matters to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and providing specifically in the Land Development Code that any appeal from the Zoning Board of Adjustment's decision would be a matter to take to court. The Zoning Board of Adjustment then became the entity that had full and final authority to deal with special use permit issues. The Board of County Commissioners no longer had any involvement, no longer had any authority, no longer had any jurisdiction over such issues. Having delegated that authority, the Board of County Commissioners cannot now take it back by doing anything other than amending the Land Development Code, by which this board divested itself of that authority and vested that authority in the Zoning Board of Adjustment. I next looked at the text of Section 7051 of the Florida statutes, upon which the action we are addressing today was founded, under which it was brought. And I would like to distribute to you packets that contain the full text of 7051 of the Florida statutes. That's about 5 pages. And then behind that are about 4 pages of excerpts from 4 different statutes that also address the critical term of governmental entity. So if, with the chair's permission, I will pass these out to the board, to council, and to opposing counsel.
Yes, sir. If you'll turn to the second page of the handout, the highlighted sections indicate to which entity the proceeding under 7051 is to be directed. Under subsection 4, it reads, to initiate a proceeding under this section, an owner must file a request for relief with the elected or appointed head of the governmental entity that issued the development order. And subsection 11 begins, the initial party to the proceeding is the governmental entity that issues the development order.
The development order in this case was a decision issued by the Zoning Board of Adjustment to deny the special use permit. The question then arises, could the Zoning Board of Adjustment itself be considered a governmental entity, or is governmental entity a term that would be limited to the county as a whole and thus to the Board of County Commissioners? The definition of governmental entity provided in 7051, subsection 2F, governmental entity includes an agency of the state, a regional or a local government created by the state constitution or by general or special act, any county or municipality, or any other entity that independently exercises governmental authority. The term does not include the United States or any of its agencies. In this case, it is the Zoning Board of Adjustment that is the entity that independently exercises the governmental authority of granting or denying special use permits. That is the independent authority that the Board of County Commissioners granted to the Zoning Board of Adjustment when it revised the Land Development Code, and the Board of County Commissioners took itself entirely out of the decision-making process, removed from itself any authority over special use permits, and granted all of that authority to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Now, in reading that definition, there is certainly room for some ambiguity, but I would refer back to the more specific information that we looked at first on the second page. It is the entity that issues the development order that is the proper party to deal with this matter. The Board of County Commissioners cannot issue a special use permit or a denial of a special use permit. You do not issue those development orders. Only the Zoning Board of Adjustment does that, and it does that entirely independently of any ongoing involvement from the Board of County Commissioners. I appended to the back of section 7051 some excerpts from other statutes that also use the term and define the term governmental entity. Now, I hasten to point out that none of these other statutes control the definition of 7051. Each statute is entitled to have its own definition that may differ from any other. I include the additional definitions only to show that there is no reason conclusively to presume that a governmental entity is always intended by the legislature only to mean the entire county or the governing body of the entire county. It often means something quite beyond that, that would also include other types of governmental entities. For example, in section 215.985, the definition is governmental entity means any state, regional, county, municipal, special district, or other political subdivision, whether executive, judicial, or legislative, including but not limited to any department, division, bureau, commission, authority, district, or agency thereof.
Okay, Mr. Woodward, since you say there's no relativity to these other statutes, then why not stick with the definition that goes with 70.51? Does that not create confusion among us? You're making a point about governmental entity, and all of the points are related to 70.51, and in government entity, there is a definition that is specific to 70.51. So help me and this commission to understand the relativity of citing these other definitions in other chapters, because I'm not clear on why we're going to these other diverse definitions that you said is not directly relative.
That is a good point, Mr. Chairman, and I will address that. Okay. I don't believe I said they weren't relevant. I said they were not controlling. I think the relevance is just in seeing that the term governmental entity does not necessarily, in all contexts, mean only the governing body of the county as a whole. And I bring that in there because the definition in 7051, if you just look at that definition, it really is not clear on, it does not, it just says any other entity. It does not indicate one way or the other.
Okay, but I'm going to let our council address that issue as it relates to that, but for practical purposes, the reason we think we are here is all related to 70.51. Is that our understanding? Yes, sir. Okay, so I would like for the record that we stick with the definition that is given in Florida statute, 70.51 land use and environmental dispute resolution. And if I have the consensus of this board, I don't think we need to create any other issues or any of these other definitions that are related to condominiums, state uniform traffic control, or financial matters general provisions. And so I just want the record to reflect that.
Okay, if I could, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
You included the whole board in your last sentence, but I would like to hear Mr. Woodward conclude.
Yes, I want him to conclude as well, but I don't want all of these other definitions that we cannot consider. If this is a 70.51 hearing, I'm not stopping him. I want him to continue presenting. But I don't want these definitions to confuse the citizens or the legislators.
Okay.
Okay? Continue, sir.
Mr. Chairman, although those definitions do not control, I offer them only for illustration of the point that in reading the definition in 7051, if there is some question as to what is meant by governmental entity, there is no need necessarily to conclude that governmental entity has to mean only the county, because in many other contexts it can mean other things. But I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, that the definition we have to focus on is the one in 7051.
Thank you.
So having submitted the additional statutory definitions by way of illustration, I put those in the record. I will move on. I looked at case law. Case law on Chapter 7051 is admittedly sparse. I found, however, no examples in the case law of published cases reflecting 7051 actions, no examples of where anyone has ever even attempted to take a matter that was decided by a zoning board of adjustment or some similar body having full and complete final authority to make that decision, and then rerouted it to a different governmental entity in the county. I did not see an example where that issue was addressed and ruled upon, because I could not find an example where anyone even attempted to do such a thing. In each case, the 7051 matter was brought back to the attention and had as its primary party the governmental entity that actually issued the development order. If that came from the Board of County Commissioners or a city commission, if that's where the development order decision came from, that's where the 7051 went. If it came from somewhere else, it went somewhere else. I did find case law where a decision that originated in a zoning board of adjustment ended up being reviewed by and acted upon with finality by a city commission or county commission, in which case, yes, it would be appropriate to bring it back to the governmental entity that made the final decision. I would also ask the board to consider the precedent that you may set by hearing a matter that really belongs to, under your own land development code, the zoning board of adjustment. This board intentionally made the decision a dozen or more years ago not to be an appeal body for zoning board of adjustment decisions on special use permits. It only creates an opportunity to make an end run around that decision by creating a precedent where people may invoke the 7051 procedure and then come back and see if, having been disappointed in the decision they got from the zoning board of adjustment, they can get the one they like better from the Board of County Commissioners. That is what this board got tired of doing in the past, and that is why you changed your land development code to eliminate that type of proceeding. If my objection is sustained, the remedy that I would suggest would be that the zoning board of adjustment be substituted as the proper party in these proceedings, and the matter be scheduled for further proceedings before the zoning board of adjustment, that they be allowed to finish out the job that you gave them to do 12 or more years ago. Now, I realize that Mr. Castleberry may very well see things differently, and of course, he's your attorney. I know you will be asking his opinion, and as an attorney who likes his clients to take his advice, I would be quite surprised if you did not take Mr. Castleberry's. However, I would request that you make a ruling on the record either sustaining or overruling my objection. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Woodward. At this time, we will call Mr. Sid Ansbacher if you have commentary. You'll start out again identifying yourself, please.
Tad shorter than Mr. Woodward. Sid Ansbacher, Upchurch Bailey and Upchurch, 780 Ponce de Leon Boulevard, St. Augustine, Florida, here on behalf of the Boy Scout Council of North Florida. And Mr. Woodward is correct that the case law in 7051 is sparse. Sad to say, I am part of several of those decisions. Most of the cases, for what it's worth, of the very few cases that appellate courts have considered under the statute, really have addressed what the basis is that you can consider in terms of what constitutes a development order. No one gets to the delegated authority. It is whether a development order or an enforcement action has been issued such that this statute can be invoked. Regarding whether this body or the Zoning Board of Adjustment is the appropriate party to hear it, I would point out that, as Mr. Woodward has said, the statute is not as clear as it could be, but the statute does say in the very subsection that Mr. Woodward mentioned, the definition of governmental entity, a laundry list of entities and then or any other entity that independently exercises governmental authority. As Mr. Woodward has pointed out, that is a subordinate board, the Board of Adjustment. It is delegated authority. It does not enjoy independent authority. The independent authority is that which is held by this commission. And Mr. Castleberry and I talked at great length, and Mr. Woodward has as well in the past 18 months, concerning which is the appropriate board to hear this. And quite candidly, it's no skin off our nose as to whether it goes to Board of Adjustment or County Commission, as long as it is the appropriate board. And what Mr. Castleberry emphasized from the very beginning is this is a matter of alternative dispute resolution that is a determination in advance of litigation rights. That is a process that is typically addressed by the county as a policy matter and as a fiscal matter in order to address the issue of how to resolve an ongoing dispute that may well ripen into and in lieu of the litigation that it would ripen into. I would also point out that subsection 21A notes that the governmental entity on review gives you the authority, and I'm sure that Russ will get into this more, to accept the recommendation of Mr. Spofford and proceed to implement it by development agreement when appropriate, or by other matter, or method rather, in the ordinary course and consistent with rules and procedures of that governmental entity. Two options: development agreement or go by another method. But the statute proceeds with to say that even though you may accept the recommendation or modify it by development agreement or other format, there is no obligation to repeat the method or the process that took place below. So if there is a choice between going back to the subordinate delegated board that considered this matter many months ago, year and a half ago now, or to address an alternative dispute resolution that has been negotiated by and among the Boy Scout Council, the county, and the various neighbors, we would respectfully submit this is the body where the buck stops. And I would point out, if we are going to be exacting on the statute makes the neighbors, gives them First Amendment rights, but does not make them a party. We totally threw out the rule book, and we allowed the neighbors to have full participation, and certainly do not object to their continued full participation today. But we believe that if it is a choice between two options in a statute that, as Mr. Woodward himself said, is not entirely clear on point, and where there is no controlling case law, and where the governmental entity is to hold independent authority, that what Mr. Castleberry suggested from the beginning seems like the right place to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ansbach. At this time, Mr. Russ Castleberry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have talked about this quite extensively. It started out Sid and I talking about it, and then I think Sid, Ray, and I, and Mr. Spofford, and then when Mr. Woodward got involved, just the attorneys. I mean, the attorneys have set forth it's not clear. This is our first venture into a Section 70.51 proceeding. The statute is not written as clearly as we would like. I do not think the case law is particularly helpful or instructive. I did find a law review type article written by the Upchurch mediation firm that I thought would explain it. It is somewhat helpful, but it doesn't definitively answer our question either. It starts out describing the process and talking about the entity, as Mr. Woodward suggested, the entity that issued the original order is the entity having jurisdiction. But as they walk through the process, they switch from that entity without telling you why or making any transition. They describe the concluding steps as a decision by the governing body or authority, which in this case would be you. So I think we've hammered this out. I think there's good arguments on either side. I told Sid early on that I thought it was the Board of County Commissioners that was the appropriate, had the jurisdiction. I certainly respect Mr. Woodward's opinion. We do have it in the record. I think I guess the main thing that drives me is what was Mr. Ansbacher just pointed out in subsection 21A, which if we accept the premise that it could be the ZBOA or it could be the county commission, there is a provision in section 21A that says if the entity making the decision makes a decision, it does not require the applicant or the landowner to go back to any subordinate board and repeat a process that they've already gone through. The Boy Scouts have been to ZBOA.
They had the right to appeal to the circuit court. They invoked 70.51 to try to settle administratively. I think this is the appropriate board to do that, recognizing there's an clear argument on the other side. But my recommendation would be for the board to overrule Mr. Woodward's objection and to proceed with this hearing today.
Thank you, counsel. District
Mr.
1.
Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
You both have referred to subsection 21A. Of what? Of 70.51?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we just don't have a copy of that.
Yeah, it essentially says, and we'll get to that later when I charge the board with their task, but 21 is telling the board that it can either accept the recommendation of the special magistrate as submitted, it can modify the special magistrate's recommendation, or it can reject the special magistrate's recommendation. But in the 21A, if you accept the recommendation of the special magistrate without modification, you are finally adjudicating the matter, and it goes on to say, if we accept the recommendation, the Boy Scouts agreed to it, it would not, that does away with any requirement for the Boy Scouts to go to any lower board and repeat something they've already done.
On the 4th page of the handout that was provided to us by Mr. Woodward, it is in that 21A.
Page 676.
Yes, I'm sorry, it is on there. It's on page 676, 21A. Thanks for passing it out, Michael.
Any further questions, Commissioner Harris?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Lible, any questions?
I do. What part of the hearing?
We're dealing strictly with procedural, whether we're going to sustain or overrule. And we have a recommendation to overrule.
Well, my question was, do we have to answer that? Mr. Woodward asked us.
Yes, I think after discussion, we need a vote to either sustain his objection, which would end the proceeding and send it back to ZBOA, or overrule the objection and continue to get to the substantive matters that we're here today to discuss, which my recommendation was to overrule the objection and proceed today, recognizing that he made a very good argument, and depending on how this whole thing goes, we may hear it again someday.
Okay. Mr. Woodward, could I have some questions with you? If special magistrate and both these bodies spent months coming to a conclusion that's very close, I think you'd agree, they have agreed to just about everything but one item on this deal, and that would be the noise part of the shooting range. Now, what I'm going to ask you is your opinion of the grandfather under the county code 823.16. If we don't
think you can go there
I
until
can't.
we
We're
decide.
talking about the procedural.
We've got to deal with the procedural before we
Okay.
get into the case
All right.
itself.
You wanted to sit it up?
Just a moment. Commissioner, do you have any questions at all on the procedural issue that we're dealing with? And the procedural issue is, again, related to the recommendation from our attorney and the commentary, other than the substance of what we're actually dealing with. Cannot get into the substance until we deal with this procedural.
Okay. Excuse me.
I have a question for our attorney. It seems like the statute to me, even though our land development code doesn't allow us to be the appellate decision, it seems like it's giving that back to us. Is that?
That's our interpretation.
I mean,
And again, sometimes I sit up here and lose my patience and tell you this is a clear-cut answer, and
Right.
I'm not telling you that today. I'm telling you that this statute, that there's not a lot of cases under it. It's a dispute resolution statute, so normally when people go through it, their dispute is resolved, so there's nothing to litigate, and therefore not very many reported cases. But yes, our reading of it is that the statute gives this board the authority to review this matter and to resolve this section 70.51 proceeding, even though it originated at a subordinate board to ZBOA that this board does not have appeals to.
It also seems
that's the issue. I mean, that's
right. It also seems to me the author of the statute already laid out what the government entities would be, We don't need to go out looking for a different definition. It's
Well,
pretty
I
much.
agree with that, but I mean, in fairness, if you read the definition of governmental entity, and under 2F, it includes any county or municipality or any other entity that independently exercises governmental authority. Mr. Woodward would say that would be the ZBOA independently exercises governmental authority because its appeals do not come to you. The other, as Mr. Ansbacher suggested, they do not independently exercise governmental authority. They exercise only the limited authority you have delegated to them under our rules.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Harris.
Another question. I was here over a dozen years ago when we changed that, as you were. And I remember when we did that, and now anyone since that date that wanted to appeal had to go to the courts. They had to go to the expense of going to the courts if they wanted to overturn a decision. So if we sustained what Mr. Woodward, we overruled what he had to say, does that open the gates and change it so that anyone who has an appeal of what the Board of Adjustment did could go ahead and use this 7051 and come
Yes.
before us?
They would have an
So it
option.
changes what we effectively did before.
They would have an option, just like the Boy Scouts did, to appeal to the circuit court or to invoke 70.51, but as in my 20 years, we've never had one, and certainly in the 12 years since we've changed it, we've never had a 70.51. Matter of fact, when Mr. Ansbacher first called me about it, I acted like I knew exactly what he was talking about, and then I went and pulled the books out to see exactly what he was talking about, so.
Thank you. Any further comments, Commissioner Harris?
Well, it makes the decision a lot bigger, you know, and we have debated over the years if we wanted to go back to the old way. Did we want to let the Board of Adjustment have an appeals process that came back to us instead of going to court? So it's a big decision.
I think time has shown us, though, that your decision back then worked. We've had little controversy since the.
Well, that's because it goes on to the court and we don't know about it. I think the reason we haven't had this check before is I don't think many people thought about looking at 7051.
Maybe.
I think they didn't know that they had an option because most people who appeal really resent the expense of going through the court system.
I agree.
And that was one reason I thought we might want to go back to the old way to be kinder to our constituents and not have them have that expense. But that's a whole nother debate, but to me, it makes this a lot more of a crucial decision than just, it's not as simple. It changes a lot of things. Okay.
Correct.
Again, in fairness, it did cost the Boy Scouts and the county money to engage in this proceeding. We hired Mr. Spofford as the special magistrate and split his fees, the attorneys involved. So whether it's cheaper than going to court, I'm not sure, but it does cost money. It's not when did we start the 7051 proceeding? It's been months and months and months of 18 months of meetings and mediations, and it's actually has been a very good, productive process. We've gotten to a point where, as maybe you'll hear in a few minutes, we're down to one fundamental issue. Both sides have come together and made concessions and tried to work it out so they could be good neighbors. But, it's clearly a decision of the board.
Thank you, Counsel. Commissioner
Mr.
Phillips.
Chairman, I have one more. Oops, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Harvey.
Attorney Castleberry, basically, we don't have to go back to the old way, though. This statute allows our constituents to come back before us if they choose to do that.
That is our interpretation.
Okay, so, right. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Lyle, anything else?
I'm good.
After the deliberations that have transpired, we have a procedural objection that is before us. I'd like to know the pleasure of the commission as it relates to a motion to sustain or a motion to overrule.
Motion to overrule.
Second.
Have a proper motion and a second to overrule. Further discussion. District 1? Yes
Yes,
or no? Okay.
you
All
know.
right. District 2?
Yes.
District 4?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
District 3? Yes. The objection is overruled. At this time, we will have the summary of proceedings and recommendation by Special Magistrate Ray Spofford.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. Appreciate the opportunity to act as a special magistrate in this proceeding. And I was fortunate to have patient and cooperative participants along the way. And although I would have liked to bring you a solution, I think we've come, a long way, and we're pretty close. Under Section 70.51 of the Florida statutes, the magistrate is, the primary responsibility is to act as a facilitator or mediator between the parties in an effort to effect a mutually acceptable solution. We haven't come to a solution, so I've provided a recommendation considering the facts and circumstances set forth in the request for relief by the Boy Scouts Council and any responses and any other information produced at the hearings in order to determine the action by the governmental entity if it is unreasonable or unfairly burdens the real property. The action, of course, as mentioned, is the order by the Zoning Board of Adjustment. And just to recap, the Zoning Board of Adjustment denied the request for special use altogether. So that would include both the existing uses would continue as is without expansion as a non-conforming use, and any other of the planned expansions would not be able to go forward. The reasoning of the zoning board was that they believed that the proposed use would have an adverse impact and unduly restrict the enjoyment of the permitted uses in the surrounding area as a result of increased traffic on Baden-Powell Road and from increased noise from the shooting range that is located very close to and pointed in the direction of many of the surrounding residential areas. Now I'd like to just give you a little background on the regulations that have applied to the property over the history of the project. The Scouts acquired the land, as I understand, in the 60s and began operating the camp as a use in the late 60s. The camp sits on 692 acres. It's the main part of the camp, south and west of Baden-Powell Road, is about a square mile or 640 acres. At the time that they established the camp, there was no zoning, and so there was no regulation from a zoning standpoint. In 1975, the county adopted the first zoning ordinance, and it designated the property as agriculture, which allowed the camp use as a permitted use by right. Later, there was the adoption of a county comprehensive plan, designated the property, and also was a permitted use under public facilities. And not until 2005, the changes to the county's land development code did the use become required as a condition or a special use permit. Also, I think it's important to point out as well that obviously the main issue here is the gun range, and more specifically the shotgun range. Under Section 823.16 of the Florida statutes, existing gun ranges with best management practices are protected against later zoning changes and against later adopted noise and noise pollution claims. This means that, for example, if the county were today to adopt a ordinance that would prohibit the continuation of any shotgun range, they would be preempted by Florida statute. and the shotgun range would be allowed so long as they meet the best management practices. In looking at the zoning board hearing, looking over the minutes, the basis of neighbor opposition centered around 4 concerns. Obviously, the shotgun range, and to a lesser extent, the campfire range, which is a little bit closer to the neighbors that are represented by Mr. Woodward and many of those closest to the camp use. Another issue was increased traffic, adequate water supply, and water quality, or rather groundwater contamination from the shotgun range, or the lead. It's also clear from the minutes and even from our subsequent hearings that there was a misperception of what was really proposed in the camp use. Particularly at the zoning board hearing, there was a misperception that a recreational vehicle park was a proposed use, and that was not the case. In fact, the only expansion of the shooting ranges was an expansion of the rifle range, which was to a lesser extent a concern than the shotgun range. So there was no expansion of the shotgun, it was the rifle range, which was withdrawn at the zoning board hearing by oral amendment of the application. We had the proceedings that we had in February and March of this year primarily focused on detailing the scope and magnitude of the request to expand the camp. I think a large problem in understanding the application was really to understand what was being proposed and what was the capacity, what was the magnitude of the request. And we also focused on listing conditions to address concerns or impacts to the neighbors. And as I had mentioned, I thought we made good progress. And following those 2 hearings was a point in time when some of the neighbors went ahead and retained Mr. Woodward to represent their interests. Regarding the concerns on traffic impact and the water quality and quantity issue, I think those have been addressed. In the packet, you'll see that the Boy Scouts have provided additional information regarding groundwater assessment that is conducted and determined that there was no impacted groundwater conditions. Consumptive water use permit was provided, showing adequate water capacity. And traffic, the only evidence in the record on traffic impacts was provided in the staff report as well as the application itself, showing that there was adequate roadway capacity on Baden-Powell Road. To address more of the traffic operational impacts, and not so much the capacity impact, the Boy Scouts to this point have agreed to have somebody control traffic at peak periods of vehicles entering and exiting the property. Now I'd like to just go through kind of the act to list the conditions or the criteria, since we didn't come to a complete solution. In making the recommendation, the magistrate had to consider some of the following issues to determine whether or not the order is unreasonable and unfairly burdens the camp. One is the history of the camp, the composition of the property, how it was initially used, the history or development and use of the camp, a history of the land use regulations and controls, and also how and when the land was classified, how use was prescribed, and what changes in classifications occurred, the present nature and extent of the camp, reasonable expectations of the scouts at the time of acquisition, the public purpose sought to be achieved by the order, including the nature and magnitude of the problem addressed by the underlying regulations. And are there other alternative conditions to address those issues? In reviewing these, I did find that I believe that the order by having an outright denial is unfair and does restrict the property. There are proposed uses that were in the application for special use permit that certainly were appropriate for the site. And given the historical use, development, and size of the camp in relation to the surrounding property uses, I believe it was unreasonable and unfairly burdens the Scouts' use of the property. In our proceedings, I think the participants certainly raised valid concerns. There's no question the main issue here is the shotgun range. The use of the shotgun range and a little bit to the lesser extent the campfire ring certainly do have off-site impacts and then that would need to be mitigated. So having this being a dispute resolution process and I think the settlement agreement, I'm going to go through the alternatives recommended, and these are essentially the scope. And I'll also discuss the recommended conditions.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Spofford, you're more or less summarizing your recommendation.
Close.
Which they have a copy of,
Yes.
so you might want to refer to the page
Okay.
so they can kind of follow along. Some of them already are, I think. But
The alternatives recommended begin on page 143. And before I go much further, I do want to clarify that although the participants have come to close agreement, the one outstanding issue is a time deadline for moving the shotgun range. As I understand, the Scouts have put together a committee for doing that. There's an opportunity for the Scouts to do that. They can upgrade their facilities, make it a world-class facility. Essentially, the range would move from kind of the east central part of the site to the other side of the hill, so to speak. If you look at the topography of the site, there's kind of a ridge. And the range on that side, there's far less neighbors. The further away, there's a large wetland prairie area to the southwest. Most of the neighbors off to the north-northeast. So there's no question that's a much better situation for the neighbors. Going through this process, I sincerely believe that the Boy Scouts will get there. They have offered up a number of these conditions. Those that I'm going through are mostly from their proposal with some minor changes. It's a tough situation. It was difficult to come up with a certain deadline, given the history and development of the site, the regulations that apply to it. And this is an agreement that they also have to agree to. So the committee I mentioned they put together, I understand that they've engaged a couple of neighbors to be on that committee as well. And so they're moving toward that, and the Scouts will probably go through this a little bit more in detail, but they are subject to getting funding, permitting, and moving the site. They have done some preliminary environmental assessments to show there's no listed species or no wetlands in the area that they plan to move the shotgun range. So beginning on page 143, the alternatives recommended, the following improvements and existing facilities would be proposed, and these go with a revised site plan. They have 11 open-air shelters that are within existing campsites, and there's a size. They're going to replace signage. They would have staff dormitories with up to 72 beds, aquatic center with ancillary uses, additional parking with lighting, expansion of existing parking areas near Ames Lodge and the dining hall, additional multi-use sports facilities with directional lighting, a maximum height of 30 feet, cutoff luminaires are required, up to 4 additional troop campsites, and this is really kind of the capacity expansion we finally got to up to 4 additional troop campsites with a maximum of 50 participants per campsite. A dining hall expansion by 6,000 square feet. Construction of a welcome center, which is essentially a kiosk. Expanding the Rangers area. And they also plan to relocate the current campfire ring and Order of the Arrow Dance Harbor to the center of the property, down closer to the lake on the site. And an important condition on that is that the current campfire ring will not have amplified sound after 9 p.m. and before 9 a.m. The conditions for the special use permit, and then this is where I trust that the neighbors and the Boy Scouts will continue to work together to move the range, more particularly the shotgun range. That's the primary thing. But I think they want to move the whole shooting sports complex. They've indicated it needs to be together. And it would be relocated per the site plan to the other side of the hill, as we mentioned. And it would be relocated within 6 months of getting funding, permits, declaratory determinations, and reciprocal covenants with the adjacent neighbors. And I understand Mr. Woodward probably wanted to address that as well. The existing shotgun trap range would remain in its present location only as a secondary training site to augment the relocated shooting sports facility. In terms of the shooting sports complex in its current location, it would be subject to the year-round operational limitations that are listed on pages 144 and 145. The outdoor lighting on the trap and skeet fields will be removed, and only low noise, low recoil 12-gauge ammunition will be used. That is slightly less noise from those shots. And use of the range, this was another major concern of the participants, was the potential for another user to come in. So use of the shotgun range would be by scouting participants only for training and merit badge testing. And there would be no expansion of the range. The scouts plan to offer a no-noise shooting simulator and a Laporte archery sporting clays target system. The special use permit will only apply to the scouts and cannot be transferred to future owners of the camp property, except for similar nonprofit youth organizations operating the property as a youth camp. We have light fixture standards, 30 feet for maximum height. Those that are on the perimeter of the site will be controlled by timers or motion sensors and directed inward so that we don't have trespass lighting. We talked about the no amplified sound, and also about the volunteer monitors to control traffic. And another concern raised in the meetings was no airboats. We also added an RV campground would not be permitted on the site, so just to make that clear. As I mentioned, it was kind of a difficult decision that today, if this was a new use on this site, to me there'd be no question that it would have an adverse impact and it should go in the location that is being proposed to be relocated. However, given the process that we've come to this point, I wouldn't want to lose the conditions that we have on it to this point. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Spofford. Are there questions at this point?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Pelletier.
I see a map leaned up over there. Do you have some smaller ones, though, so you can kind of walk us through where it is now and where you want to go to?
Sure.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, sir.
This is a revised map from the one that was in the exhibits to the recommendation. There are some changes to reflect the existing versus proposed uses. Existing is shown in the black. Baden-Powell Road is along this east boundary here, and then turns and goes west. When you come in, there is a bunkhouse. The changes or proposed changes would be a new ranger workshop shown in the red. And then the existing shooting range or shotgun range is here in the northeast corner. And many of the residents most affected live along Mason Lake to the north and to the east. The other ranges are within close proximity here, so the proposal would be to move them to more of the center or southwest part of the site, shown in this yellow shading. And as I mentioned, there is a hill. At the top of the hill is essentially between the existing and the proposed range. So this is on the other side of the hill from the residences. Right now, it shoots to the northeast, directly over. I did visit the site and listen to shotgun shots from the road here, from the shotgun range. They're proposing additional campsites. They're also hatched in yellow, to over here near the east boundary to north central part of the site. The yellow rectangles shown in existing campsites are the pavilions that would be added, so kind of a safety measure. The additional multi-use facilities are near the lodges in the kind of the east central part of the site. The new staff dormitories would be in the area just south of the shotgun range. And the aquatic center would be, again, it's kind of on the other side of the hill. It's in, let's see, where is he here? Yeah, in this area.
Mr. Spofford, the square, almost square area down where it says shooting sports complex, that's the new shooting range?
That's correct.
Where will they be, which direction will they be shooting from to?
I understand that they would most likely be shooting to the southeast down the hill.
Where's the levee?
I don't know that you'd want it to go back towards the hill because of their existing facility there
Just
too.
wanted to be clear on that.
Would that be southwest?
Southwest, you're correct. Thank you. One further clarification. In the recommendation, I suggested those operational limitations apply to both the current and the relocated shooting range. Since then, they've done a decibel test for the one neighbor that I know is off to the west that may be more impacted by the move. And I'm satisfied that the decibel test didn't show a significant change. And with that, I would not want to be an impediment to seeing the range relocated. So I would offer an amendment to have those operational limitations apply only to the current shooting range. And because the relocated range will have very little impact on surrounding neighbors, if any, and the actual capacity of the camp limits the use of the extent of it anyway. So.
Thank you, Mr. Spofford. Any additional questions or concerns?
Go ahead, Commissioner Harrison.
So what you're referring to are the hours that you would be able to shoot?
Yes, kind of
That we would just remove those?
For the relocated range.
For the relocated range. And what is down there? Are there any roads, or is the property developable in the future?
It's heavily wooded. Let me pull this up for you. Right now, this is fairly heavily wooded, kind of mostly oak. There are 2 roads here on either side, and 1 here. Those are just trail roads right now. There will be gated areas here for safety if it were to move down here. Off to the southwest is a really large wetland area. I mean, it's...
That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
So chances of the area off of the property, the part that they don't own of development, would be very low if it's
That's
lowland.
correct. In fact, the owner, if I recall correctly, owns a mitigation bank, wetland mitigation bank, and it may or may not be in one. I haven't verified that, but it's a large wetland area.
Good.
Commissioner Lible.
I just wanted to, I didn't hear what I read in the packet that there would be no shooting allowed on Sunday. Is that still?
No, the limitation is actually it's on page, there's 2 different, they've got the limitations year-round when summer camp is not in season, excuse me. Yeah. That's on page 144. Starts at item 2A. So the Sunday limitation is from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Okay. All right,
And then in the 8 to 10 week summer camp, there is no shooting on Sundays.
Okay.
During the summer camp.
But you're talking about doing without the hours and the Sundays when it's relocated.
That's correct. When they did the decibel test from shooting in that location where it would be relocated, it was barely audible from Baden-Powell Road on the northeast side.
Okay, Mr. Spofford, you have certainly been very comprehensive in your summary. Any further questions on the summary?
Good.
Okay, we will move forward. We will now have comments by counsel for Boy Scouts. There has been a 10-minute limit there, and the same will go for Mr. Michael Woodward, who comes behind Mr. Ansbacher. We ask again that all of your comments be addressed to this board.
Hello again, Sid Ansbacher for the Boy Scouts, and I do want to point out, as Mr. Castleberry and I discussed yesterday, my remarks are going to be quite short, and what Mr. Castleberry and I discussed was having our total of 3 speakers will be 3 minutes each. Follow me in order that our presentation can be done and over with, and then Mr. Woodward can take whatever time he wants to after his presentation for his clients in whatever order they wish, in order that you can have a cohesive whole both for the proponent and for the opponent. But again, we only will have 3 speakers.
Okay, so you're in other words, the 10 minutes is allocated. You want to allow 3 different people to take 3 minutes each.
Well, after my presentation, in lieu of having 3 minutes each within the public comment, Mr. Castleberry and I discussed it yesterday in order to try to ensure that you are able to obtain the benefit of both our position and then Mr. Woodward's position, that it could be done all as a whole. So if you have any questions, it can be handled within that segment.
Counsel?
That's fine with me, if it's fine with the board.
Okay, so you're going to use your 10 minutes.
I hope not.
Okay.
But I do want to preface this by saying, having done a lot of 7051 processes, which really have not been used much since the Act was created in 1995, and everybody back then thought it would be used a lot because, as you suggested, Commissioner Harris, it seems to support reasonable resolution of disputes rather than going to the uncertainty and expense of litigation. What I have found is if a government does not want to cooperate And that doesn't mean give in. It means have a full give and take. The process is pointless because you are really going back to the government that denied you in the first place or that issued an enforcement action against you in the first place. And what we found here was Brian Hammonds and Russ were extremely cooperative. They attended the first hearing here in Commission chambers with the various neighbors and us, and then went out to Camp Shands twice for lengthy meetings that we held with neighbors. And Russ and his staff and Brian Hammonds and his staff have been amazingly cooperative with giving of their time to us as well as to Mr. Woodward as well as to Ray Spofford. So whatever you decide today, all I can say is this is how the process is supposed to work, and I really appreciate it. It's been a very, very beneficial experience and a useful experience for us. What I would like to just summarize with is the substance of what we have done and why will be handled by Jack Sears, who will be the third speaker. We will have Bill Harrington, who will discuss the background of this camp, and we will have Mouse Starling, who will discuss the synergistic relationship that we have with the community and why it was important for us to come here in this process rather than go to court. I will point out one thing as a preliminary procedural matter. On your map, the range that we are relocating to, we are actually going to be shooting in the opposite direction of what Ray thought. We are going to be shooting to the north-northeast, and the reason is it's back uphill, it minimizes the shot fall, and it also, in light of people complaining that we are shooting out and therefore the sound is carried farther across Baden-Powell Road, regardless of whether we meet noise ordinance standards or not, we are trying to accommodate their interests as well as was suggested before, those to the southwest of our camp. So with that in mind, I just want to point out that what we have come to at this point, as Mr. Spofford said, is a tremendous number of conditions that we have negotiated for 18 full months. We could have gone to circuit court and made the technical arguments. The technical arguments, for what it's worth, would have been that the increased noise of shooting didn't apply because we actually had waived any expansion of our shooting facilities. And as Mr. Spofford said, the increased traffic was addressed because the only evidence on the record regarding traffic standards supported our compliance. What we tried to do here, and as I pointed out in the procedural discussion, was ball up what 70.51 would normally do, which is allow neighbors who appeared below to speak and actually allow them the ability to sit at the table with us, literally and figuratively, in this case for quite some time. And what we have done is we have worked extremely hard to listen to what they had to say in terms of minimizing what we would call the externalities, the impacts of this camp. And, you know, if we don't have this process, and if we are denied, then what is the net result? We have a grandfathered use that we can continue to use under Florida statute and under your code, but then that doesn't make us the scouts and it doesn't make us good neighbors. What we're trying to do is to come up with one, very tight constraints on a use that was 99% of our discussion, even though it is not part of what we actually were asking for, and that is the shooting. We are spitballing at this point an estimated cost of $400,000 to do this. Mr. Sears will testify after me that this is an entity that lost in the low six figures or is projected to for fiscal year 2014. So please understand, this is funding that doesn't come as easily as it does for a for-profit. And yes, we will have expended a lot of money for dedicated uses for the capital improvements that are at the heart of this proposal, but it is going to take real effort for us to get the funding necessary to move this. And I understand that there is the one remaining significant question on the table, and that is whether we will agree to a time constraint. And my concern is that while it is entirely within your control to accept, reject, or modify and make a recommendation to us, I want you to understand the limitations within which we are operating, and to understand and listen carefully to Mr. Sears, because as your attorney will tell you, and as I'm sure you've heard many times, all I am is a mouthpiece. All I am doing is making legal argument. The core issue dealing with the fiduciary, fiscal, and capital expenses has been analyzed fairly well by Jack Sears. And he is the person who I think can discuss with you what we're doing and why we're doing it and what our limitations are in terms of both material change as well as our constraints. So with that in mind, unless you have any questions, I really would like to cut to our speakers so that you can actually hear what our story is as opposed to just legal argument.
Thank you, Mr. Ansbacher. We're going to take a 3-minute recess. And then
Thank you.
Mr. Sears will be the next speaker. Thank you. Walton had to go.
Where's Bill?
That's not Jack Sears.
Look like Jack Sears.
No.
Change your name, Bill Harrington.
No, it was
Yeah,
Bill,
Jack and I
Maurice,
traded places. Is this okay, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. I
I'm
just
gonna go,
thought,
and then Mouse is gonna follow me, and then Jack can
okay, as
wrap
long
it
as
up.
you have the order, sir.
All right, good afternoon, Commissioners.
All right, good afternoon.
Bill Harrington, 7300 Krill Avenue, Palatka. I would like to speak in favor of the special use permit on behalf of Scouting and Camp Shands. And while you've got all the technical detail, I'd like to speak from the heart here just for a few moments. I've been proudly involved with Scouting for over 50 years, both as a youth and as an adult volunteer. I have 3 Eagle Scout sons. I spent the majority of my adult life trying to make Putnam County a better place. A better for all of its citizens, young, middle-aged, and seniors, especially seniors right now. I believe that on balance, under the special magistrate's guidance and wisdom, all parties involved will be well served by approving the special use permit as documented before you today. I'd like to make 3 points as you consider your vote on this important decision. Point number 1, Scouting is the 3rd best value transfer program in the world, and I say that with a lot of conviction. Yes, I said the 3rd best. By values, I refer to responsibility, accountability, and gratitude. Why 3rd best? First, of course, should be our homes where our children are raised. Second, our churches, our synagogues, and places of spiritual worship. As a youth, these were our second homes. You, as you individually and collectively are well aware, in many of our homes, it does not afford for our young men and young women a growing opportunity to have instilled in them solid moral values such as character and integrity. The Boy Scouts of America is helping to fill this gap, and Scouting does not do the usual things. Secondly, there is a great competition for time and attention of our youth. Therefore, our facilities need to be first class to attract and keep our Boy Scouts. The outdoor experience changes lives in a way that cannot be duplicated in schools, in our churches, on the athletic field, or in our neighborhoods. And improved camp shans will allow the outing to remain in scouting. The Boy Scouts of America, North Florida Council organization, this is the third point, stands ready and willing to make a $2.6 million investment in Putnam County. You, this county commission, and those that have served before you have searched long and hard, far and near, hoping to find those companies, businesses, and individuals willing to invest in this great county that we call home. As citizens of Putnam County, we would like to be known for the best at something, and with your approval today, Camp Shands, which has been here since the 1960s, will become something that is the very best, located right here on our home turf. A great facility that will bring jobs and support local businesses. With your approval today, Putnam County will be known as the home of Camp Shands, a first-class, five-star facility that will greatly benefit today's youth, tomorrow's youth, and impact the lives for generations to come. I thank you for your time. Hope I didn't use up too much of my 3 minutes, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your presentation, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
All right, next speaker.
Thank
you. Good afternoon. My name is Maurice Sterling. My address is 206 Dogwood Lane, Palatka. I am 3 months shy of being a lifelong resident of Palatka and Putnam County. The last person I would dare compare myself to is the Lord Jesus, but the Bible record tells us that his contemporaries said of Christ, "Can anything good come from where you were raised?" Well, brought up on West River Road, I joined the Scouts as a wide-eyed 10-year-old boy in the little hamlet of Bostwick, Florida, and attended Scout meetings at an old wooden 2-story schoolhouse long before it was restored. Today, 47 years later, I have the honor to stand before you in my capacity as the council commissioner, the top-ranking uniformed volunteer leader of the 30,000-member 17-county North Florida Council of the Boy Scouts of America. And although the jury is still out, perhaps something good has come from where I was raised. I thank you for the opportunity to speak today in favor of the recommended proposal to grant a special permit to make needed improvements at the Baden-Powell Scout Reservation near Melrose, a facility more commonly known as Camp Shands. The camp is the flagship facility owned and operated by the council, of which the scouting community in Putnam County is a part, which delivers out-of-doors programs, activities, training courses, and events to boys and girls and for volunteer adult leaders throughout Northeast Florida, from other reaches of the state, and even a few scout troops for whom the lure of Northeast Florida in the middle of the summer, for reasons I cannot explain, offers a welcome respite from their familiar camping haunts in Georgia, Tennessee, and the Carolinas. Camp Shands has operated continuously, commissioners, for almost 50 years. That's for almost half of Scouting's 105-year-long history in America. It's operated as a successful accredited Boy Scout camp, offering both weekend and week-long camping, training, and a myriad of outdoor activities that include hiking, nature study, aquatics, target shooting, obstacle courses, climbing walls, and yes, even big-time movie making, as the camp has doubled on rare occasion as a makeshift film stage for Hollywood blockbuster movies such as Doc Hollywood, starring Michael J. Fox, and the Hallmark made-for-TV special called Easter Child. As a young camper at Camp Shands, I remember trying in vain to swing a heavy shotgun around in time to hit a clay target zooming across the sky, and recall the acute pain of dejection when the leader told me I wasn't old enough or big enough to shoot the shotgun. I think the rejection scarred me for life. I went home and told my mother I was going to quit the Scouts, because if they weren't going to let me shoot the gun like the rest of my chums, I wasn't going to be in their goofy club. My mother, who's always been craftier than I, wholeheartedly allowed me to quit just as soon as the dime a week dues she was paying had expired. But the dimes kept coming, and my mother never allowed me to quit. And as you can see, I'm still here, promoted beyond my level of competence, which is proof that even scouting is not immune from the Peter Principle, and I still can't hit a clay pigeon on a skeet range. This has been an interesting process for us. A few months ago, when we applied through the county for a special use permit, we were a bit shell-shocked. An organization whose scout code is to help other people at all times and to do a good turn daily. We were surprised how displeased and how disgruntled some of our neighbors were who lived across the street on Baden-Powell Road. We have since, thanks to the good efforts of Ray Spofford, the special magistrate, and the county staff, waded through a very thoughtfully crafted, mediated process in a good faith effort to resolve the concerns of our neighbors. That mediated path has been expensive for the Scouts, but I believe the plan that's before you today exemplifies the Scouts' willingness to walk that extra mile, to be the kind of good neighbor that any American citizen would expect the world's largest youth-serving organization and charity to be. But let us be clear. Although the Boy Scouts were on site first, and any noisy or rambunctious activities emanating from our side of the fence existed long before our present-day neighbors arrived, it should not be lost on this board that the lion's share of the concessions and the cost borne in the proposal before you have stemmed from the Boy Scout side of Baden-Powell Road. 18 months ago, during a heated public hearing in this very room, I recall one gentleman who vehemently objected to the Scout shooting range, saying that he objected to, quote, one more kid in that camp if it meant another gun being fired. I thought, what a self-centered, I've got mine and to heck with everybody else attitude. I mean, in this troubled world in which youngsters must navigate and grow up in today, what better place would we want a 13-year-old kid than to be in a Boy Scout camp? Perhaps the concessions on the Scouts' part to mitigate for our bothersome noise has softened that man's views. But his initial opinion was in stark contrast to the one expressed so memorably by the popular Depression-era humorist Will Rogers, who said the only problem with the Boy Scouts is there aren't enough of them. Your approval of this matter today will allow the Scouts to deliver more and better worthwhile programs to serve the kids of our county and beyond. And to this end, on behalf of the Boy Scouts of America, I respectfully urge your positive consideration, and I ask for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Jack Sears. I am the Scout Executive and Chief Executive Officer for the North Florida Council Boy Scouts of America. Our principal offices are located at 521 South Edgewood Avenue in Jacksonville, Florida. We are the owners and operators of Baden-Powell Scout Reservation, also known as Camp Shands, 1453 Baden-Powell Road, Hawthorne, Florida. I used 20 seconds just to get that on the record, clerk, okay? Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you today. I stand here with those who stand behind me out of respect for your time, that I will be speaking on behalf of 16,000 young people, their 6,500 volunteer leaders, and a network of 300 faith-based and civic-based organizations who deliver scouting values to youth on a weekly basis. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. 12 words, the Scout Law. They are not just words on paper. They are words to live by. And could you imagine for one day if every man woke up, turned to that loved one that he faces before he starts his day, and says, I promise to live by those words today? That's what we're about. That's what about Camp Shands is about. That's about what those improvements are about. And I join with the other speakers in acknowledging that we were very disappointed in the outcome from our neighborhood of what we are doing at Camp Shands. But because we believe in those words, and instead of making this a legal action, we saw the opportunity. We saw the opportunity to be that scout that we say we are. This process, this magistrate's report, is a demonstration of what a scout is all about. I would implore this board to open a newspaper, go to the internet, or turn on the TV, and you can find example after example in this country where disputes are dissolved in a way that are not respectable to that community. I have something on my mirror that I look at every morning, and it says somewhere out there there's a young person that's going to take our place in this life. That is not a choice. That is a fact of life. I'm very pleased and proud on behalf of the Boy Scouts that we have modeled the type of behavior to resolve a dispute with a governmental entity, our neighbors, in such a way that that behavior can be modeled for the young people who follow us. And as you think about it, your decision in full approval of the recommendation today will set an example for this community and the type of people who want to replace us and you in the future. I would offer that as a nonprofit 501c3 organization, we do not have an endless stream of funding to do things. We have to raise money. We operate on the benevolence of others. And while it is a major concession and commitment on our part to relocate the shooting range, it's the right thing to do. We see a real opportunity here. The opportunity is before this commission to accept the report as is. The opportunity is for the Scouts to work with a renewed and revived neighborhood so that we can continue to deliver scouting to more young people. And it's a real opportunity in dispute resolution to show the world that Putnam County, an owner, and its citizens know how to solve things. So I stand before you today and ask emphatically to take advantage of that opportunity. An affirmative vote and acceptance of the magistrate's report is what we seek, and also give us that opportunity to work with the citizens in the neighborhood who have already stepped up to help us in this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very kindly, Mr. Harrington, Mr. Sterling, Mr. Sears. At this time, we will continue forward on this agenda. And Mr. Woodward. How do you choose to allocate your time? You're going to use your 10 and then what's your pleasure? You have 10 minutes.
I think I can cover what I need to cover in the way of the legal issues in 10 minutes, and then I imagine my clients and other members of the public may anticipate giving some brief testimony.
Well, again, in all fairness, if you have specific people at the end of your presentation that you want to bring forward, you certainly have that option. Otherwise, we will call the others who have filled out the comment cards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
I want to clarify a little bit about my client's position. I want to talk a little bit about the Zoning Board of Adjustment's decision to deny the special use permit and why that was a justifiable decision. And I want to talk about where we are in the state of trying to resolve this as friends and neighbors. The issue of what was agreed to, what isn't, what it's going to take to get us where we need to go. This goes back to a question I had earlier, but wasn't the right time for it. I'm going to get to that question. Mr. Sterling may have accurately recalled the statement of one individual from the Zoning Board of Adjustment hearing. I don't know, I wasn't there. But that unfortunate statement should not be taken as characterizing the overall position of my clients. My clients have been living with the camp in its current non-conforming use status, at its current level of usage, and they could go on doing that. The Zoning Board of Adjustment decision was to not do away with the camp, not to do away with the gun range, but simply leave things at the status quo to which everybody had comfortably or otherwise accommodated themselves. My clients would be happy for the Boy Scout camp to expand its facilities, to have a bigger gun range, all of those things, if it can be done in a way that will not create greater adverse impacts on people in the neighborhood, and in a way that we know is really going to happen, and not just that we hope will happen. We heard from Mr. Spofford the main issue is the gun range, particularly the shotgun range, but when you look at the minutes from the Zoning Board of Adjustment hearing, there was a lot said, a lot of testimony about noise that wasn't limited to the gun range. It was the idea of having more people coming in, more yelling, more boisterous activity to the point where people living across the road from it would have less and less peace and quiet. The issue of traffic came up quite often as noise. I'm going to have to disagree with the statement that it was conclusively shown that there was no traffic problem, that the only evidence was in the staff report. That's not correct. The staff report may have correctly stated that there would be no level of service violation, but the fact that there might not be a level of service violation does not mean the same thing as there would be no impact. The testimony of the people who live on that road and who know those conditions there is valid, competent, substantial evidence. It's the sort of thing that courts have upheld as a legitimate basis for denying an application. Just because a road or a segment of road meets some minimum level of service standard doesn't mean there aren't serious impacts at particular spots on that road at particular times, when in that one place and one time you have hundreds of people trying to get in and out. So the Zoning Board of Adjustment did have competent, substantial evidence. Their decision is a legally supported one, and a decision simply to leave the Zoning Board of Adjustment's decision undisturbed would be a legally valid and factually valid decision today. Now, where are we with negotiations? As someone who is a certified mediator both at the circuit court and appellate court level, I find it odd to be in a situation where the mediator brings up a discussion of what was said in mediation and what was agreed to and what wasn't. Because typically those things are never mentioned. You either have a mediation agreement at the end where people have signed it and said this is what we agreed to, or you have no agreement. And that's because in the nature of things there are trade-offs. And until you have a full agreement that everybody can agree to, you don't have an agreement on anything. In Mr. Spofford's recommendation, he says at one point on page 6, the parties and participants have reached agreement except for one outstanding issue, referring to having a firm deadline for relocating the gun range. That's not exactly accurate, because we never really came to a full agreement on anything. It's like you're going to buy a horse, and you can come to an agreement on how much you're going to pay for the horse and what else you're going to trade for the horse, and when you're going to make the payment, but it's still contingent on the other side agreeing to give you the horse. The horse in this case is a firm deadline for moving almost all of the existing gun range facility to a portion of the camp's property where the noise from that facility, even if it's expanded, even if many more people are using it, will cause less net noise to the people in the surrounding area. In exchange for that relief from the noise, my clients were willing to accept other impacts. They're willing to accept more traffic, more people, but only in exchange for that. It was always related. It was not two separate issues. So we can't look at this as though my clients have agreed to everything and they're fine with everything except this one thing. The things that they tentatively agreed to were with the idea of, well, we will accept these additional expansions, the additional intensity of use, having more people coming in, we'll put up with all of that as long as the biggest noisemaker of that increased use is further away from us. And we know for sure when that's going to happen, and that it really is going to happen. Not having a deadline for moving the gun range means there's no certainty it will ever be moved, and no remedy if it never is. Saying, gee, we'd like to do that, we think that's a great idea, is not the same thing as saying we definitely commit to doing it by a certain time. Not only does the lack of a deadline for relocating the shooting range leave it uncertain whether the shooting range will ever be moved, the preconditions in this recommendation, the preconditions for moving it make it even less likely that it ever will. One of the preconditions is, well, we'll move it after we've got enough money to do it, after we've raised enough money to move it. Well, as a potential donor, I have no incentive to give money to do something that only has to be done if I give the money to do it. It's almost a self-defeating provision. So my clients did not agree to anything at this point because the thing they wanted most, the thing that they were willing to trade for, they haven't been given. And so they're not willing to give anything in return for it. That's not evil. That's not bad. That's just plain common sense, good horse trading. We were almost there. We were almost there. Maybe if the process had gone on a little further, there could have been an agreement about what an acceptable deadline could be, but infinity is not it. Infinity does not work, does not get it done. When the stars align, when we have the money, when this and this and this, well, then we'll move it. That's not a trade that we can make. That's not a trade the people who live across the street from this facility should be expected to make. Some of my clients and others now may wish to give some testimony. I don't have a particular batting order. Some of them may have given you cards. Others will speak as they are moved to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Whippler. There is not a specific need for the comment cards, but it does help us to keep better order in the agenda. At this time, Corey Idris, please come forward. Following will be Mr. Paul Kidd and Mr. Jerry Warren.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you. My name is Corey Gedris. I live at 128 Indian Mound Road in Satsuma. I'm a parent, I'm a teacher, and I'm a resident of this area. I've been teaching in this area for 14 years, and my story is not unlike many in scouting. My son came home 5 years ago and said, Mommy, I want to be a Cub Scout. And I said, okay, whatever. And so it was something that my son and my child were going to do together, and I was going to get a night off a week. And it didn't take me long to realize that this program was so needed for our youth in our community. I am the PAC committee chair and the troop committee chair of 2 units that are in East Palatka, Florida. We meet at the Shrine Club. I have young men that go with me to Camp Shands. Young men that would not be able to go to other camps. Young men that aren't able to go to Jacksonville, to the zoo, because it's too far. They don't have the gas money, or their vehicles won't make it even if I provide the gas money. But we can get them to Camp Shands. I have young men that live in Satsuma that are shocked at the stars that they see at Camp Shands. Satsuma is just as remote as Camp Shands. But when they're in the camp, they put down their electronics. They step out of sight of buildings, and they see that magic of scouting, that magic of that outdoor program. I have a scouter that I've known for a while now, and he told me something that has stuck with me. Every meeting, a scout makes a decision if he is going to be a scout again the very next week. And to that I say, every camp out, a scout makes the decision if they're going to the next camp out. And so I ask for you to please consider approving this request so Camp Shands can continue to improve, continue to draw our youth out there, so that they can continue to experience that magic of scouting and that growth in the outdoors that they so desperately need in this community. Because without it being here, without that draw here, I'm concerned that they don't have anywhere else to get that. As we all know, the opportunities are limited for our youth in this community. And I know we are Boy Scouts of America, but we also serve young ladies, age 14 to 21, and venturing scouts, where they learn to be leaders. It's important to the youth, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gedris. Mr. Kidd?
Paul Kidd. I live at 161 Long Lake Road, Hawthorne, about 6/10 of a mile north of the gate of Camp Shands. So I'm a neighbor as well as a scouter. I'm also a retired Episcopal priest and have been going into the prison system, the state prison system, for close to the past 30 years on a fairly regular basis. It's one of the reasons that I'm wearing this uniform today, is because I see scouting, as a very valid way to somehow try to limit the number of our young people who wind up at Union Correctional or Florida State Prison or other places throughout the state. I live close enough to hear the use of the gun ranges down on camp. But those disturb me a lot less than walking out my door the other day and somebody's over in the woods right next to my property, and it sounds like a minor war is going on over there. I'd a lot rather know that those weapons are being fired down on legitimate ranges under qualified supervision that is primarily concerned with the safety not only of the people that are doing the shooting, but of everybody else in the vicinity. I urge you to approve the report of the arbitrator. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Jerry Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jerry Warren. I live at 1420 Baden-Powell Road. If you stand in the gun range and you measure about 1,000 feet north of the gun range, that's my house. And I understand what it feels like to have a war going on in the property next to you, because we've endured that before. I don't really know what to say today. I would say that when the zoning board of adjustment heard the request for the special use permit last year, based on the facts that the scouts provided, based on the facts that the neighborhood provided, based on the report of their experts, I think they probably reached the right decision. And the right decision was that the scouts are asking to increase the intensity of use at the camp. We're not against Boy Scouts, we're not against camps, we're not against gun ranges. All we want as neighbors is our right to use our property in a peaceful fashion. They took all that evidence into consideration, and they said the increase in intensity, use of the road, withdrawal of water from the ground, possible groundwater pollution, noise of all types of activities, and increased usage of the gun range is incompatible with the neighbors' rights to the peaceful use of their property. And I think that, given the evidence at the time, was an appropriate decision to reach. Since then, the Boy Scouts reached out to us. We've negotiated, partly through our lawyer, partly there were discussions even beyond the lawyer in good faith to reach resolution. I don't think we're done negotiating. As our attorney indicated, we're almost there. We have given and taken in both directions in a lot of ways, and I'm very pleased. We've negotiated with good faith. I really think the Boy Scouts have negotiated in good faith. I think we're both trying to be really good neighbors. I work 2 hours from here, and so when we have these meetings, this is the third or the fourth one that I've been to. There have been 2 at the camp. When there were decibel meter tests going on in the gun range, every time I was there, that required me to take a day's vacation. We paid our lawyer. You know, we're all bearing a cost here, and we're bearing a cost because it's the right thing to do, and the right thing to do is to reach a resolution. Part of me says I really wish you would reject the Boy Scouts' request for relief, and if you did that, I would understand it, and I would hope that as a result of that, it would send us all back to the negotiation table to complete that which we are almost there at. I would like that. I wish there was some other way. All I'm going to tell you as an owner of property across the street, you just can't imagine what it's like when that gun range is in full operation. We're talking many, many shots per minute going on for hours and hours. It's enough to drive you crazy. And so we would like to continue negotiations. We'd like to get this to a place that makes us happy, makes the Boy Scouts happy. I want you to know that I have agreed to serve on the Gun Range Relocation Committee and help them plan it, help them raise money for it. I'm committed to reaching a solution, but I don't think we're done with our negotiations. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Any other speakers? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
My name is James Burke. I live at 1422 Baden-Powell Road. If the committee, and thank you for having me up here. If you end up approving this modification, that's the one thing you could do is modify it. You could either reject it, accept it, or modify it. Right. And we, like we've said, as neighbors, have gotten close. What we were hoping for is that someone would say, now this, where we're going to show you where the relocation of the gun range will be, we want to have a time frame. I know you have to raise funds to get there, but you have to, we can work together on this. There should be a time limit to hit that goal.
So what do you recommend?
2.5 years.
Just wanted to know.
And that would give them some time. They're ready to put, he said, I don't remember the number, but $2 million into upgrading their facility. Well, you know, that's money well spent, but part of the activities that go on out there is that gun range, not climbing trees. They like to go out there and shoot. And so if that's what it's going to be, then fine, but move it over there. And I was on the committee that went out there with the to check for the noise, and we came up with that location. That was a good location, but that's a modification. If you're going to go that direction, I would like you guys to put on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your commentary, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you for hearing me out. My name is George Allen. I live at 167 Long Lake Road.
on land that my great-grandmother bought 100 years ago. So while we're talking about who was there first, I'm not trying to pull that, but we all pay taxes. And all the neighbors who have come before you and all the neighbors who've come before and been at every single meeting, if you add that up, that's many millions of dollars worth of taxable assessed value, and it's many votes. And I've heard while we're invoking God that the voice of God is the voice of the people. And I think that that really matters, and I'm grateful for the board to hearing me out, to hearing all of us out. I would like for the fact that the Board of Adjustment rejected the original application to be very meaningful to you guys. It was many people came up and spoke. I was one of them. We were as polite as we could be. I wouldn't want one person saying something that wasn't quite right to indicate that we're anti-Scout. I appreciate the fact that all the Scouts have come up here and told you all the wonderful stories about how meaningful Scouting is to them. It's meaningful to me too. And I've always said, and I brag, in fact, about the fact that I'm next to Baden-Powell Scouting Camp Shands. It matters to me. I think it matters for kids to be able to come and have this experience. And anything that the community can do, I think, being the neighbors, to facilitate that, we will. And I think that we have. And when they say that we've been negotiating for 18 months, that's true. But I think that's also because the Scouts have essentially... I think that we're closer to an agreement, but we're not there. Not all the concerns have been addressed. Attorney Woodward listed 6 people who he represents, but the community encompasses many hundreds. And not all of them have been in contact with Mr. Woodward, not all of them paid him, and not all of their concerns, I think, is he fully aware of. With all due respect to him, and I know he's a fine lawyer. There were a lot of discussions before Attorney Woodward was retained as to whether, who would join and who would pay and who he's going to represent. And it was actually a very small slice of the community that went forward with him. So that's the time and the mediation with Mr. Spotford and Ansbacher and Attorney Castleberry. It's not necessarily indicative of the broader concerns of the community. Traffic is one thing. There's 7 hairpin turns in Baden-Powell. When you have 2 trucks passing each other, the road's not wide enough. One of them has to pull over. There's no shoulder on the road, and it's a very narrow roadway to begin with. And 7 hairpin turns, honestly, it's dangerous. There have been times when there have been many dozens of school buses coming in and out within just a very small period of time, in and out of the camp. It wreaks havoc on the road. When a school bus is turning around that corner, you literally have to bail off the road. It's not safe. When I think about concrete trucks, all the construction materials, it's really dangerous. I don't know where the county's going to get the money to keep Baden-Powell up with greater numbers, to improve the road, which actually it's going to need to be after all those trucks pound it to death. My understanding is that with special use permits, my major concern, I'm standing with my neighbors about the shotgun range, but my major concern is numbers. My understanding is that the Scouts are closing a lot of other camps in South Florida and that they're going to be sending a lot of those Scouts up to Baden-Powell. So it's going to be drastically increased numbers. When they talk about moving the range, I think that they, frankly, I think that they should have moved a lot more quickly and I think that we should be further along when it comes to moving the range, because if they would agree in a concrete fashion to remove the range, I think their project gets approved by the community. And I think that if they did that, it would eliminate 98% of the opposition. Again, I think there needs to be numbers. I think traffic needs to be addressed. A cap on numbers or an understanding of numbers. There needs to be a way for us to enforce whatever agreement we actually hammer out. I think that's fair to the community and to your constituents. Well, that's it. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your commentary. Are there any other public comments? Keep in mind, after we close this part of the public hearing and we go into commissioner deliberations, unless you are called upon, then there will not be any further public comment. So please come forward.
Thank you for the opportunity to let me address. My name is Ed Brock. I live within 2 miles of the gun range we're talking about. I can hear them. And I'm just here to tell you my opinion for what it's worth. And what Michael Woodward said a while ago expresses my opinion very well. The only thing that I would have to add to what Michael Woodward says is just do the right thing. I think doing the right thing is negotiating a time period to move the range. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brock. Please come forward. He's coming. Pull that microphone closer to you, please, sir.
Hello, my name is Alex Gedris, 128 Indian Mound. I'd just like to say that the shotgun range, I know it is very loud, but for the scouts who have not shot a gun before, it is a very good learning experience, because I just shot a shotgun for the first time a few weeks ago, and it was a very good learning experience. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Courageous. Okay, giving you opportunity to please come now before we go into deliberations. At this time, we will close the public hearing, and I will refer back to Mr. Russ Castleberry, and then we will continue with commissioner deliberations and decisions. Mr. Castleberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think everybody's tuned in to the primary issue, and I would refer the board to page 144 of the agenda, which is paragraph 1 regarding the relocation of the shooting range and the suggestion of Mr. Spofford. It does not contain, obviously, a specific deadline. It says it will be moved upon obtaining all required funding, permits, declaratory determinations, and reciprocal covenants. It will begin within 6 months of obtaining those conditions, but as Mr. Woodward and some other neighbors point out, that gives them a little comfort. As the Boy Scouts point out, they're hesitant to agree to a time certain because of the money they have to raise in order to do it. To cut, I guess, to the chase, the board at this point under the statute is obligated to either accept the recommendation, modify the recommendation, which in this case would be to impose your own deadline, or to reject the recommendation, which would be to leave undisturbed the ruling of the ZBOA and preserve the status quo at the camp. I think there is another alternative. We may talk about it in a moment, but I think probably, and again, Mr. Woodward's comment was well taken about his client's position. I think nobody should assume that if we come out of here without a deadline, he and his clients are going to walk away 90% happy because they got a lot of things and they only lost a little bit. They will have not achieved their fundamental objective, which is the moving of the range and a dependable time on which that will occur. So I think probably we need to talk about whether the board what is the feeling of the board as to whether or not there should be a definitive time frame for moving the range, and that can sort of lead us where we go from there. If the board wants to accept the recommendation as it is and not have a deadline, that's one thing. If the board thinks there should be a deadline, there are a couple different ways to achieve that. But I think fundamentally we need to talk about what is the board's opinion on Mr. Spofford's recommendation, which does not contain a specific deadline.
Thank you, counsel. I think that it's very commendable, number one, that we have had the dialogue among the neighbors and the camp. It's heartwarming to know that, number one, we know we can work things out. The issue that we have now is that while we do have an agreement on so many issues, we have so much that we have agreed upon, we have this one point It appears to be one point. I understand there may be some other issues in the minds of some, but it appears that we have one major point that causes grief to some. If consensus of the board, if we could hear at least either from the Boy Scouts attorney or Mr. Sears or someone just to address this particular issue for the benefit of our deliberations as it relates to not having a definitive time for the moving of the range. We do understand the fiscal and the fiduciary issues that are there, but what have you reasonably discussed in your mind if that happens to be the issue that we want to deliberate on? Someone just threw out a number a moment ago, 2.5 years. I don't know how that fit anybody's schedule, but what do you have to say about that?
The problem that we face is negotiating against ourselves, candidly. And one thing that I think we need to take note of is this is not going from the Battle of the Bulge to being somewhere in the North Pole. What we are doing is we are dramatically limiting our scope of operations and time in a manner that's far more limiting than anything we have now. What we have now is a completely grandfathered use. And we can continue to do that from now until time immemorial, as at least 2 of the neighbors and their representatives have said. We have a strong purpose to go inland into the property. To the extent that we are constraining ourselves in the interim with the time constraints, with, as was pointed out, no shooting on Sunday, for example, during the camp time period, and reducing our ability to use certain higher velocity ammunition, our view is we are doing this in an orderly and stepped manner, which, by the way, needs to also be factored. The fact that we are using more expensive ammunition, the fact that we are retrofitting, we're taking things internal, indoors, we are using more electronic quasi-shooting so that people are able to get the ability to practice without having as many guns fired as often. This isn't going straight from 100% to across the property. It is an inducement already built in for us to move across the property. And I really didn't hammer on that perhaps as much as I should have at first. Our concern is there are a number of steps, as Ray already pointed out, including agreeing to reciprocal provisions with our neighbors, which frankly Michael raised maybe 2.5 weeks ago, and that we have to negotiate as well. Understand that may take some time as well. The fact that we do have to fundraise, and while we have raised, I acknowledge, over $2 million, it's $2 million over many years and $2 million with dedicated funds. So we are literally starting from scratch in terms of fundraising. So I would respectfully note that not only are we doing this in a stepped fashion, but whatever your response, whatever your recommendation might be, please take into account that there are multiple things, including getting declaratory judgment or statement from the county and the Department of Environmental Protection, which has statutory jurisdiction here, to determine that we can indeed move across the camp. If we do not get these declaratory statements, then what happens is, if you start from day one right here, and let's just say it's the 2.5 years, you need to understand, DEP, for example, is short-staffed. My first email and phone call to DEP's general counsel was April of this year. I got a response Thanksgiving week. That was a phone call and an email. It is not going to be something that is going to happen immediately. So please understand, between getting reciprocal covenants with neighbors that haven't started and getting third-party agency approvals, that if you consider any time frame that you factor in, This isn't something where we start from scratch and it's anything that's in our control at all, that we have to factor that there are multiple things beyond our control. And that would be my compelling point as you deliberate.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
May I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
In order to move the shooting range, do you have to cut through forest? Is there a road already down to this area? What does it entail and what kind of cost are you looking at?
It's pretty heavily wooded. And one thing, quite candidly, and I'll ask Russ, because to show you, while we've been OCD, we've also been ADHD about it. One question that we have not asked, that we frankly have been thinking about, and have not even looked up, to be very candid. Russ, what do you have in the nature of a tree mitigation ordinance?
None.
That at least becomes a reduction for mitigation. But the fact is, you have lots of old growth woods back there, hardwoods and softwoods. And so the answer is yes, we would be clearing out a fair amount. We have already done the preliminary wetland study. We have done the preliminary listed species study. That much, I will say, is already by the boards, and it does appear if we are shooting uphill, it's the best place on campus for us to shoot. I mean, we don't debate that at all. It's just that the spitball of 400,000 is only a spitball, and we would simply suggest that to come up with a date starting on today and not taking into account the fact that we do have the agency review that everyone has already agreed to, the declaratory relief, and the time for reciprocal covenants, just doesn't take into account the reality. And for any of you who have even negotiated on the purchase and sale of a house know how much fun that can be. So we would just ask that you would take those into account.
So are you telling me the estimate that you have so far is 400,000?
To paraphrase Mr. Woodward, that's like say, it's the best guess we have. It's not even an estimate, ma'am. It is absolutely a back of the envelope. It could be 300, it could be 500. 400 seemed to be the reasonable mid-range of what we were looking at and the most likely. But that's only based on what we know preliminarily before we go in and find out what is actually literally on the ground.
I'd like to ask another question. So shooting the shotguns, I don't know a lot about guns, but they are noisier and the sound travels more than the 22s. Is that?
More than a 22, I'll grant you that. Yes, ma'am.
Not more than
Okay, so
270.
is there a way that you could move the shotgun part of it to another place without spending that much money? It's skeet shooting. Does it take improvements?
It does, and it has, and I think that really Jack is the person who can discuss the particulars. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to answer the question. So before I get there, I would add to our council's comments, which are all accurate and true, that the funds that we have raised and have pledged for the improvements that we are going to do at the camp, they're donor restricted. Donors are expecting certain programs to go up with their name on it. And we're 18 months behind getting started on that. So our good faith efforts to relocate this range and what we think and believe is a good ballpark number of $400,000 is a reasonable way to reach out to the neighborhood and to the county to say, here's our opportunity. We can resolve a dispute. We can move the range with all these conditions in place. The first point of the scout law is a scout is trustworthy. Why would a scout agree to do something that he knows he can't deliver on? The point being is, are we going to get those declaratory agreements from the county, the state, the DEP? We don't know yet, so why would we agree to something that we can't control? We believe that given the process that we've been through over the last 18 months, that the neighbors would be interested and willing to step up and to do those covenant agreements because we're doing what we've been asked to do. We're meeting them on their request. Funding. I got 30 years of working for the Boy Scouts of America in 3 different states. I would put my track record of fundraising up against anyone, and here's what I've learned. Fundraising in a 501(c) not-for-profit is different than a governmental entity because we're not a taxing authority and we just can't tell this is what it's going to cost and we need it and everybody's going to pay the freight. And we're in a position where we rely on the benevolence of others. I have learned that when you can create enthusiasm, excitement, and opportunity, people are willing to give more to a parade than they are a distressed ship. The imposition of putting out a time-certain deadline will come across to some donors as, wow, there's real trouble in River City. But the opportunity here is for all of us to work collectively together to keep this positive dialogue going forward, Mr. Chairman, to have all of our neighbors step up and to help us get those covenants, to show up at public hearings in support of what we're trying to do, and to also to help us when it comes to giving and getting of their time, talent, and their treasure. And I'm glad that Jerry and Jimmy stepped up when they were first asked to serve on the committee, a board-level committee to help us do that, and they were quick to say yes. And I'm hoping that they can take that enthusiasm with the other part of the neighborhood. So to speak to your question, Madam Commissioner, operationally, it is important to keep all shooting sports together from a safety standpoint. Having someone with a span of control where the rifle range is, the shotgun range, the archery range, from an operational control standpoint, it costs more money to have dual processes going on. And it just makes sense to move it all together. We're glad that we're saving some money by leaving the existing trap range intact so that for an occasional use, which the neighborhood has agreed to as part of the magistrate's recommendation, that we would not need to mitigate that land. Because once you abandon a shooting facility, you have to mitigate the land of the shot off of the land in order to do that. So we're not abandoning our current site once we get to the relocated range. So I really see the special magistrate's recommendation. I'm excited about it. I'm enthused about it because I like the sentiment of our scout organization, that our board is behind it to do what we need to do to move it as soon as it is reasonably possible. And that's the momentum we come into this, and we hope the neighborhood could get behind that too.
Thank you, Mr. Sears. Just before Commissioner Pellicia, Council.
Yeah, I just want to say, maybe I'm stating the obvious, but I mean, where we are is the Boy Scouts would clearly like you to accept the recommendation of the special magistrate unchanged. Mr. Woodward and his clients would like you to either reject it or probably like it better for you to modify it and impose a reasonable deadline. And until the board indicates what it wants to do about the deadline, we're not going to get very far in these type of discussions because the Boy Scouts have no real incentive to say anything because right now they're sitting there without a deadline imposed on them. So I think to bring it to a head, the board needs to definitively indicate whether they are comfortable accepting the recommendation without a deadline or not, because I think that takes us in 2 entirely different directions.
Thank you, Council.
Mr. Chairman, may I be invited to give a response to comments of Mr. Ansbacher?
Please come forward.